This story began once long ago in the homeland of all wizards, in the beautiful country of Ake. In those days, people who had incredible power lived in this country. But later, God decided to deprive these people of magic, and the great Ahea lost its power and influence. And since the world was angry, Ahea immediately became a tidbit for invaders. And for a country that is not capable of defending itself, there was only one way to stay afloat. This is marriage with your worst enemy, trampling your own pride. On that distant evening, in the royal palace of Ake, it was restless. The second prince of the kingdom could not restrain emotions. This young man named Jenner Katadal was very outraged by the decision of his sister. Then, the young man standing by the window said, "Submit the tone, Jenner." These words belonged to Jenner's older brother, Dequita Katatel, who was the first prince of the kingdom of Ahus. "But brother, this is a complete absurdity. To send a sister to the empire of Radon, right into the hands of this Kvanah. At least you know what people say. Ahea sold the princess to strangers to prevent the war. The country gave it to a Torn to be a tyrant who kills dozens of people a day for fun." Then the sister slowly looked up and said calmly, "Jenner, stop. The first princess of the kingdom of Ake, the Usfur Katatel, was beautiful, like a fabulous flower, even in sadness." She softly continued, saying that Jenner should not blame her older brother, because she herself insisted on this marriage. The Usfur said a little firmly, "This is mine and only my decision, so stop." And then, in an absolutely confident voice, the girl interrupted the young man, who tried to object, saying that she was in perfect order, after which the princess added that he should take care of his father and obey his brother. Suddenly, Jenner powerlessly hugged his sister's knees, and she, in turn, said, "You must be strong." Meanwhile, the first prince, who was silent at the window, all this conversation, looked sadly at his brother and sister. Looking at the people's relatives, a broken voice, the Katator said, the Dikwit. "Usfir, thank you." And then Dikwit continued, "Thank you for always defending Ahea, and for this difficult decision, however, thanks." Usfir lowered her eyes and answered quietly that she was born a princess, and it would be foolish to think that she would marry love. Then Usfir added that marriage can save the kingdom from the threat from the empire of Radon. And soon the day came when the noble people of the country gathered in the main church of Ake to attend the ceremony. The princess in the wedding dress was charming, and her groom looked courageously and solemn. Conflicting feelings took possession of the girl. When the question was whether she was ready to take Kvanah's husband, she mechanically answered yes. The princesses were confused, and the heart was ready to jump out of the chest. After all, in front of her was not just a man who was preparing to become her husband. The emperor stood in front of her. Concluding the ceremony, the bishop said, "Before the gaze of the goddess Fahar, who created this world and destroy it, I declare you husband and wife." The priest, bowing his head and making half a step ago, said that the groom could kiss his bride. The Kvanah's hand raised the edge of the veil with a slow and delicate movement, opening the girl's face. Usfir raised her eyes and met her gaze with her. From that moment, legal spouse. The Emperor Radonsky said quietly, but imperiously, "Close your eyes, princess." The man bent to the girl, who obediently closing his eyes, gently attracting her face to him. The newlyweds' lips met for a moment, causing in the hearts and souls of both a whirlwind of unexpected and extraordinary emotions. And the couple froze, slowly moving away from each other, so as not to interrupt this moment that excited them. Finally, they came to their senses a little, and the man gently and sympathetically asked if his bride was in order. Usfir was absorbed in emotions and could not immediately answer Kvanah Radonsky, realizing that from that moment she became a married woman. She realized that now that the alliance with the emperor was fastened with a kiss of the oath, there was no way back. As soon as the ceremony ended, Kvanah Radonsky put his bride in the imperial cafeteria, and they went to the Empire of Radon. While the motorcade was on the way, the Usfir reasoned that her husband arranged too much a commotion with a hasty departure from Akaya. She suggested that since Kvanah himself founded the Empire Radon, he was not just to leave his brainchild unattended. But the girl doubted whether he was really worried about the empire and his subjects. She remembered the rumors that said that the emperor is a tyrant, a monster and a killer. The princess opened the carriage window so that fresh air would beat her face, And when she looked out of the window forward, she saw her husband. The emperor was a beautiful and stately man, and the girl thought that he, as if God himself in the flesh, and I, stuck in my golden cage, look unworthy and sparkle against his background. Yusfir for a long time watched the magnificent figure of Kvanah of Radonsky at the head of the motorcade, and she tried to understand what she was compared to him, the great Emperor Radon. Then the princess remembered that once long ago, a great silver forest, a guardian deity, revealed her mercy to the royal family of Ake. Since then, in every generation of the royal family, one wizard awakened, and this wizard defended the country, thanks to the force given to him. Looking at small magic lights that appeared in her palm, the girl thought that this time a wizard fell to her. She tightly squeezed the lights in her palms, realizing that it was only worthless crumbs and not real magic. But the main question that the princess was interested in was whether she could cope with her new role. Yusfir thought about what would be done to her if the emperor's interest in her suddenly disappears. At that moment, an obscure figure appeared between the trees surrounding the road in a dark hoodie. The figure extended forward a palm in which a clot of energy of dirty red color appeared. The princess noticed this movement from the carriage and, not feeling danger, approached the window. At that moment, the red arrow unexpectedly pierced the crew window, heading right into the girl. The motorcade stopped, and Kvanah Radonsky galloped back to find out what happened. The guard informed him that the carriage was unexpectedly attacked by an arrow from the forest. The emperor leaned through the window to the Yusfir, trying to understand whether she was in order. But when he opened the door of the carriage, he saw an arrow breaking the girl's heart. In the fireplace hall of the royal castle of Ake, the voice of Princess Yusfir sounded, who told Dequit that she was scared. The girl explained that she did not want to get married and leave for someone else's empire. She begged her older brother and asked if there was any other way out, to which the first prince replied that it was painful for him to see his sister's tears, but they couldn't do anything else. A country that has no army, no money, no territories that can be bought off can resist the empire. If only the keeper could defend the country as before. But this is impossible. Daiquit said with regret that this is why they are forced to make such sacrifices. And now, lying on the floor of carriages with an arrow in the heart of Yusfir, thought that the brother was right that evening. If I had the true magic of the keepers, and would be at least a little more useful, this would not have happened. The girl's eyes closed, and she lost consciousness. Only from somewhere from afar, she heard a voice that called her and asked to wake up. And suddenly, in an instant, Yusfir came to her senses and abruptly opened her eyes. She was very surprised, because her heart was just breaking through an arrow. The girl could not understand what was happening to her. She turned around and saw her husband, who was sitting at the door of the carriage. Kvanah Radonsky was in despair and repeated one word. "Please, please." At this moment, the Yusfir realized that the person whom the emperor holds in her arms was herself. The security tried to inform Klanahu that the empress could no longer save, but he did not hear them. The man who attacked the girl said, "It was stupid." The emperor rose from his knees and angrily said that he had never believed these dirty northerners. "I should not agree to this absurd game in a happy marriage. Well, now everything will be different." And then Yusfir realized that the world awaits something very terrible. Emperor Radonsky said loudly that their marriage union was now terminated. And then, having clasped his teeth, he added that Ahius would pay for his betrayal. The emperor ordered the accompaniment to hurry up with a return to Radon, and Yusfir rushed after he stopped him. But she only saw the back of the retiring Kvanah Radonsky. Trying to catch up with her husband, the girl did not immediately realize what was happening to her. Suddenly, she felt pain, as if her body was torn to pieces. Then Yusfir realized with horror that he could not leave the place where she died, and she only had a pain from understanding what would happen to Ahaya if she could not cope. Suddenly, the princess heard a familiar voice next to her, which he said, "Poor Usfir." A man squatted near an abandoned carriage said, "Your blood has not even had time to dry." Yes, it was her older brother and the first prince of the kingdom, Dikwit Katatel. Yusfir was relieved to think that her brother came to save her. At this moment, another person asked Divit what he feels, developing a plan for so long and now completing it, to which Dikwit, with an unpleasant smile, replied that this is an indescribable feeling, to finally get rid of a headache. The princess was shocked, not understanding what headache her brother was talking about. Meanwhile, the first prince expressed regret that there was no way to identify the corpse. After that, a man in a dark hoodie assured the Dikwit that he hit the heart with an arrow. Listening to these conversations, Yusfir could not believe either his eyes or his ears. Dikwit reminded the man in the dark about the second part of the transaction, and that he was promised to give strength in order to overthrow the Emperor Radon. In response, the person confirmed that everything was in force, and that the war, in which Ahea would defeat, will soon break out. He predicted that the Dikwit would become the ruler of the continent, and the name of the first prince will be chanted in all corners of the world. Dikwit only regretted that Kvanah took the body of Yusfir, and since she was a sorceress, her body could come in handy. The girl could not believe that she hears these words from her older brother. She tried her best to realize why everything happened that way. After all, Yusfir remembered that in childhood, Dikwit treated her with great love and care, and it was mutually. But unfortunately, finding answers to these questions was above her strength. As that man predicted, after a while the war broke out, and Yusfir, being unable to leave the place where she died, continued to think. It seemed to the girl that she got into hell on the ground, and she wanted to understand why the gods punished her, and for which they forced us to look at this nightmare day and night. Around the princess there were only pain, blood, suffering, and death. The war continued, and her brother, who united with another northern kingdom, gradually began to lose position. Dikwit lost Kvanah to Radonsky, a battle for the battle. The beautiful landscapes of Ahea, its forests and rivers, everything has lost its meaning in the face of war. People who were more likely loved by a girl in front of her eyes, as if someone from above laughed at the Yusfir, so for the fact that she could not die properly. In the third year of the war, Dikwit Katatel appeared before the army of Emperor Radonsky. The first prince, kneeling, called Kvanah a dirty, worthless slave. "I curse you, Kvanah Radonsky, for depriving me of my family, and now you are depriving the kingdom." To which the emperor only contemptuously muttered through his teeth, "Go ahead, king, curse! Just keep in mind that I will find your soul and kill you again." And the Yusfir, who was given to see this meeting, cried out with horror, because at the next moment the Kvanah's sword was painted red, and the lifeless Dikwit Katater fell to the ground. Then the guards asked the emperor what to do next, and he replied that this was a stupid question. After that, Kvanah Radonsky gave a short and hard team, "Burn everything here." The exhausted princess appealed to her deceased older brother. "You killed everyone, my father, Jenner. Did you really want that to end like this?" And suddenly, doomed hysterical laughter, Yusfir interrupted her words, shaking the silence. And then the girl began to frantically ask for the guardian deity, a silver forest, for help. With tears in her eyes and pain in her voice, she asked to hear her pleas. The princess persuaded the gods to merge and save Ahu, offering in return her own soul. "Oh, great gods, give me a chance to change everything." And suddenly, a miracle happened. A divine voice answered a desperate girl. Suddenly, she saw a warm magic light descending to her from heaven. Then the voice of Mrs. Silver Forest said gently, "Yusfir, my child." Suddenly, the princess woke up and saw her father and her younger brother Jenner leaning over her. Seeing that Yusfir opened her eyes, they could not hold back joyful exclamations. The girl looked at loved ones with wide eyes, unable to believe her happiness. She was perplexed. "Father, Jenner, how is it possible?" Sitting on her bed next to Jenner in the royal castle of Ahea, the princess still could not believe in the reality of what was happening. After all, she saw with her own eyes that her father and younger brother died in that bloody war. At that moment, the princess saw her father quietly talking with a court doctor. The doctor said quietly, "Yusfir is in order. The color of the eyes and hair can only change in the case of true keepers, but I do not know all the details." The girl knew that magic woke up at her 10 years. But did this mean that she returned to the past 10 years ago? The princess was tormented by doubts. "This is impossible. I just went crazy and I have hallucinations." And then Jenner turned to his sister and said warmly that she should not hurt and stay with him always. Yusfir was deeply touched by the words of a little brother. She involuntarily reached for the boy to hug him. And I realized that this is not a dream, because it could touch it. Feelings surpassed the princess, and she pressed herself against Jenner's, hugging her. Yusfir realized that Madame Silver Forest heeded her prayers, and hot tears of joy flowed down the girl's cheeks. Clutching her little brother tightly, the princess whispered loudly, which would definitely take advantage of the chance given to her. Father heard this whisper and turned around, carefully looking at his daughter. Then he went and gently laid his hand on the princess's shoulders, soothing her. Yusfir firmly knew that this time she could definitely protect her family and her country. The girl understood that for the task she would need powerful magic. She realized that she should become the strongest keeper in history. In time immemorial, the goddess of the world Fahar was a younger sister named Silver Forest, after the death of which her body was buried in the forest itself at the edge of the world, where it was revived in the form of a huge silver tree. It was next to this forest that the kingdom of Ake was founded, and Mrs. Silver Forest became his deity defender and periodically granted people her blessing. Her chosen ones received the title of keepers, as well as recognition of the people and greatness for their service. But this was a very long time ago. And then the moment came when all the magic disappeared, and with it the protection that the lady surrounded people. Ahea, who lost the support of her deity, was on the right path to death, and everyone was immensely happy when magic awakened in the little Princess Yusfir. People were very happy and praised the girl all the time. It has not yet become clear that her magic was not capable of anything. The princess could only talk with plants, so she believed that her power was not completely awakened. The plants were very kind and friendly to the little sorceress, but they were not in their power to help Yusfir to cope with the reproaches and accusations that she received every day. In a past life, the princess only watched the fall of the kingdom, doing nothing, but now everything will be different. Yusfir thought, if Madame Silver Forest really fulfilled my desire and sent me to the past, then she had to endow me with special power, in which case it turns out I am special. So the girl reasoned, engaged in magic in the royal palace. And suddenly something incredible happened, forcing us to freeze. She could not believe it, and her eyes widened in surprise. In a flower pot opposite the girl, a small green sprout with 3 leaves appeared from the ground. And when surprise and delight passed, the girl began to be perplexed. Is it all that she was capable of now? Did the lady correctly understood my prayers and returned me to life, giving me only these abilities? Of course, this is better than in a past life, but this is not enough. Yusfir realized that the power that she has now will have too little. I can't prevent Kvanahu to destroy my kingdom. Submitted into these sad thoughts, the girl sat, looking at a small sprout in a pot. At that moment, a familiar voice rang behind, which made her sharply turn around. Hello, Yusfir! Near the doors to the chambers stood her older brother, Dikwit Katatel. The appearance of the prince was so unexpected that the girl was able to pronounce only one word. Brother. Dikwit enthusiastically said that he heard about the awakening of strength from the princess. The first prince expressed sympathy, as he heard about severe pains in Yusfir. But in her head, the phrase of his brother from a past life sounded. It seemed to the girl that in front of her, the Dikwit who wanted to take her dead body to take advantage of it. Therefore, she abruptly repulsed her hand, which the prince was going to touch her, causing him complete bewilderment. Dikwit looked at his sister with full surprise eyes. The girl became very embarrassed, and she quickly apologized, referring to the fact that she was still not good. She said, apparently, magic somehow influenced my body. I hope you understand me, brother. The prince made an apology. Of course, everything is in order, sister. You must have been really easy for you now. Then Dikwit gently took his sister by the hands and wished her a speedy recovery. But now that Yusfir learned about her brother's real motives, his every word seemed to her a pretense. Meanwhile, Dikwit said that she should tell her some unpleasant news. The princess was very surprised, not understanding what was being discussed. Of course, you have become a keeper, but many still cannot believe that the Silver Forest blessed their people. This is terrible, but people are still not sure that their princess really has magic. And since these words outraged the Yusfir, the Divot hastened to assure that he personally did not doubt it at all. And then, expressively looking at the sprout in the pot, continued, But you must understand these people, sister. Yes, your magic has awakened, but what if you are not able to use it? The princess had nothing to say in response to her brother. Therefore, Dikwit continued, do not be upset, Yusfir. We should not have such great hopes on you. In the girl's mind, a picture from a past life surfaced when she joyfully informed her brother that she could use magic. Little Yusfir told Dikwit what she spoke with flowers in the garden, and asked what she could do with this now. But, unexpectedly, the older brother did not share her childhood delight. This is not magic, but an ordinary trick, Usfir. Think about what people will say when they find out that you are only capable of it. Then he advised his sister not to tell anyone about his strength, promising that he would protect and take care of her if she remains next to him. And then people in the kingdom began to whisper that the princess could not use the power, and that they did not believe in her. Dequit promised to help her, but all this ended with a treacherous arrow in her heart. Usfir plunged into these memories so much that the prince was alarmed and asked if everything was in order with her. The girl wanted to answer, but at that moment it seemed to her that she had a spirit of her herself from her past life. The ghost of Usfir laid her hands on the princess's shoulders and asked if she was going to take revenge in order to protect Ahea. "What are you capable of, Usfir? After all, the mistress did not choose you, but only wanted you to go through this hell again." The girl struggled to convince herself that this was just an illusion. The ghost convinced Usfir that the guardian deity just plays with her. At one point, gathering his strength, the princess pushed her ghost from herself. Daiquit, who watched his sister, could not understand what was happening. Usfir slowly came to her senses, gradually getting rid of unpleasant obsession. And to the next question of her brother, whether everything was in order with her, he answered in the affirmative. The princess realized that she definitely needed to meet with Mrs. Silver Forest to find out what she wanted from her. In the northern forest, on the edge of the world, there was a royal carriage, from which the Usfir came out, accompanied by 2 guards. The ice wind blew, and it was very cold, so the guards suggested that the princess return to the castle, fearing for her. But the girl answered them that he could not turn back yet. A little earlier, Usfir turned to her father with a request to allow her to visit the guardian divine in the northern forest. The princess claimed that since she was awakened, this would be the right decision. But the father objected that only the king has the right to meet with the Silver Forest, and then only once. The king said that the lady is very friendly, but she also has periods when she is like a fierce snowstorm. "Once I visited her, begging to revive your mother, Usfir, but the lady did not heed my request. She said that the revival of the dead is contrary to the laws of the goddess Fahar, and I lost your mother forever, giving up the last forces of the northern forest." The father was afraid that something could happen after this trip, but she promised to return if something was going wrong. Since the mistress herself gave the princess her blessing, the girl believed that the meeting would help her understand what to do for Ahea. The king doubted for a long time, but in the end decided to allow his daughter to use this chance. And then the princess gave a small bright red amulet with words, "Take it with you, the Usfir." Father explained that this is an artifact that gives heat, the creation of the ancient dwarfs. "Once upon a time, I bought it for Rosanna, your mother. I hope he will help you." And now, feeling the cold breath of the northern forest, the girl realized that the amulet did not allow her body temperature to decrease. She was immensely grateful to her parents, who protected her from the cold on the edge of the world. Usfir firmly knew that she would never allow himself to lose loved ones, and for this, she was absolutely ready to change her fate. In the current realities, the princess simply had no other choice. She knelt down on the ice soil, intending to use her ability to talk with plants. The girl did not care how much magic had. She stubbornly asked her to give her an answer. Usfir gathered all her forces, addressing the plants of the northern forest. "If someone hears me, please, I need to meet with Madame Northern Forest." Kneeling and giving all her magical forces, the princess continued to beg her to let her in to the mistress. And suddenly, something incredible happened. The snowstorm began to retreat, and the sky cleared. The girl was shocked by this and saw the parting trees, realizing that she was allowed to enter. And then she ordered the guards to stay in place and wait for her return. The guards fulfilled the order, and Usfir entered the deeper of the northern forest. The princess immediately felt that between the trees much colder than outside. And soon the girl heard the voice calling her, and saw a large silver tree. Usfir realized that in front of her is Madame a Silver Forest. She asked the princess what brought the girl here in this life. Hearing a familiar voice, Usfir realized that she was not mistaken, and this is the lady talking to her when she was returning to the past. After that, Usfir dared to ask, since she was returned to life, what she could do for the Lady Guardian Ahea. And since she gave her soul for her rebirth, can she ask for a little more magical power? But the mistress's answer was unexpected. Yusfir, it seems to me that you were mistaken. All this time I watched you, princess, but I have never heard your prayers. You know that I can fulfill only one desire for you, to make you Queen Ahe. The confused Yusfir answered quietly, Yes, but I heard your voice when I returned to the past, and so I thought that you want to entrust me to something important. But the lady was inexorable. Enough, Yusfir. Return to the palace. Your body is not able to withstand this cold. From artifacts in this forest will not be a scent soon, and you are the same as your father. But the girl firmly replied to these words of the deity that she did not care. Better I will die here than I will simply watch the war and do nothing, as in a past life. Please, lady, I want to save my people and my loved ones. Then, having knelt down, the princess added that she was simply obliged to protect Ahea. Tell me what I can do. I do not want to hide behind other people's backs and palace walls. The fact is, the Usfire, that your magic is so weak, because I no longer have the strength to give them to the keepers. Therefore, how hard your past life was. To some extent, I am to blame. And so I decided to share with you my life force, Yusfir. I think you really can change the future of Akai. And then the magic light of a large silver tree rushed directly to the girl. At that moment, the princess again heard the insidious voice of herself from a past life. The lady said that now nothing will stop you, and you can do everything. But what can you really? Then the insinuating voice continued. After all, in the end, you will still suffer and die, as then. But Yusfir, gathering all her will, replied that she wouldn't be so, and that she doesn't care if she would die or not. And then the girl pressed her palms to the cold ground, from which the shoots of the green vine began to break through at the same moment. The sprouts quickly turned into trees, interwoven with each other, and Yusfir felt the magical power overwhelming it. Rising from the knees, the princess loudly and confidently said that she was no longer going to be afraid. On the main gate of the border of the kingdom of Ake on the weekend, it was very calm, and even to some extent boring. The only guard could not resist and yawned sweetly, immediately receiving a strong slap in the guard from the head of the guard. The guardsman immediately regretted his awkwardness and tried to apologize to the authorities, who screams that there was no weekend on the border. The soldier began to babble. You work hard today, Mr. Chief of Guardians. And he turned around, hearing his steps behind, and stretched out, welcoming the approaching princess, the keeper of Ahe. The inhabitants considered a 20-year-old Yusfir. The Katator considered the mercy of the goddess Fahar in their kingdom. The number of victims has significantly reduced since you personally began to strengthen our borders, Your Majesty. Yusfir replied that this was her duty, and she is glad to be useful to her country. The security chief was very pleased. The prickly vine with which you wrapped our walls help a lot in protection from enemies. And arrows and almost impenetrable shields that you made for us are simply magnificent. Perhaps this sounds ridiculous, but sometimes it seems to me that you and I went through the war together, Your Majesty. The mention of the war caused a girl's mixed feelings in the soul. She remembered the terrible events that had to endure in a past life. Then the Yusfir answered the guardsman that he was more insight than it seemed, but he did not understand her comments. 10 years have passed since the princess returned to the past, and all this time she continued to study the magic, without sparing her time and effort. After meeting with Madame Yusfir, I wanted to be able to more than just grow protective plants in a couple of moments. And she worked on herself at the limit of the forces of her body. The girl knew that she had too little time, and did not allow herself to slow down for a moment. Meanwhile, the news about the conquests of Kvanah and his growing empire quickly reached the princess, and in this life, Yusfir understood that soon a young and successful emperor would get to Ahea. And also the girl realized that, how much do not strengthen military power, her small kingdom is not able to withstand the Radon Empire. But the princess firmly decided to do everything to protect her country. Ahea will not fall for anything. At that moment, a messenger ran up to them and said that terrible news had been received. A letter came from Kvanah Radonsky. Yusfir was sure that she would not turn off her journey, even if she had to get married again. The valet read out a letter in which only a few words were written. I need a princess, nothing more. Such an impudent statement caused a violent reaction among the members of the council who was present when reading a letter. But the cries of the inadmissibility of even thoughts to give the princess into the hands of the enemy caused her only sarcasm. because in a past life they have already done this. The letter of Kvanah exactly repeated his letter from a past life, which made Yusufzai think, the slave who became the emperor. Perhaps in a past life he went the same path of humiliation and universal contempt, like me. And perhaps that's why he became such a cold and cruel person? However, Yusufzai decided that this was not her business. It was more important that the gentleman believed that the army of Akai is able to withstand the army of the empire. The crown prince Dikwit Katatel, with theatrical sincerity, opposed the sister to send this monster in the clutches of this monster. But I am the king and should be impartial. But as a true ruler, first of all, I must think about his people, right? And then he told the girl that as the keeper of Ohe, she should understand him. Yusufzai understood that he just wanted to send her, but said aloud, "Of course, brother. Besides, there is one circumstance." She looked Dequita directly in the eye and said, "I really want to marry Kvanah Radonsky." And after only a week, a wedding ceremony was scheduled in Ahi, on the eve of which the Usfir retired in its chambers. The girl quite coldly met the Dikwit, who entered her without an invitation. "What brought you, brother?" The crown prince invited her to talk to hearts with her beloved brother in the end, to which Yusufzai asked him not to hesitate. After that, Dikwit put a necklace with a blue stone in front of her on the table, and the girl was surprised why she was for her. A brother with easy sarcasm suggested that she read more, since it was not just a necklace, but an artifact of communication. "Keep it with you, Yusufzai. He will allow you to contact me at any moment, wherever you are," and added a conspiratorial tone. "While you will be in the empire, take out all the weaknesses of Kvanah and inform them to me." This phrase aroused a complete bewilderment in the girl. Yusufzai recalled that they now have an alliance, but Dikwit explained that their marriage was just a cover for cunning plans. The princess excited by this expressed fears. "But if we are revealed, a real war may begin." And the young king answered her with an insidious smile. "You are so naive, sister. I'm getting ready for war now." The brother said that he was waiting for the possibility of an attack on Radon, in conspiracy with other kingdoms of the north, and also has a powerful ally. If we prepare, then to trample the Kvanah and his empire will not be difficult. Yusufzai was surprised to himself that she had not guessed about a powerful ally right away, because his brother could not get magical objects without help. And this meant that on the side of Dikwit, there was a strong wizard, capable of creating artifacts. And again, a vision from a past life visited a girl. Is he really again, and my brother wants to untie the war? Meanwhile, the pause dragged on, and Dequite recalled that her answer was waiting. Yusufzai realized that the refusal of her brother would not solve her problem. He will simply kill her, as in a past life, and the whole situation will happen again. Are all efforts in vain, and I cannot change anything? The princess tried to understand whether the future is so invariably, with any attempts to prevent future troubles and misfortunes. Dikwit sympathetically asked, did the Yusufzai really believed that her marriage with Kvanah would solve all the problems overnight? Then he slapped his forehead. Poor thing, you really do not know the whole truth. And his brother handed her a secret document, which he brought specifically for her. And then he explained that, according to this document, the keepers cannot have children, as they give themselves to the Silver Forest. You will not be able to use magic outside Ahai, and you will never become a mother. Yusufzai said that it was a lie, but her brother replied that she lost her motherhood as soon as Madame Silver Forest chose her. This is not a lie, but I found a document in the most secret part of the library where only the king can enter. Imagine how Kvan is angry when he finds out that his wife will not be able to give birth to him heirs. He will be in such rage that he will definitely want to take revenge on Ahi for this meanness. But the princess could not believe and screamed, "Enough to lie, brother!" To which Dickett suggested that she think about why there are not a single mention of the descendants of the guardians in history textbooks, and Yusufzai realized with horror that this might be true. Can't I prevent the war in this life? In the early morning, on the day of the wedding by the river, horsemen stopped on the road to Achaia. The guard tried to convince Emperor Radonsky that they could attack at any time as soon as they crossed the border. Just think, in these forests, killers, thieves, deserters are hidden, and you are not even in armor. But Kvanah interrupted him. Enough of this nonsense, better give me clothes. I can't appear in front of the princess with a layer of sweat and road dust on the skin, right? At this time, the Eosphere stood on the castle's balcony, not paying attention to the morning coolness. She waited for the emperor to arrive. The princess was pale with experiences due to the upcoming wedding ceremony. The night before, Daiquit, leaving her chambers, invited the girl to carefully consider their conversation. And Eosphere immediately went to the library, where she spent all night, and found out that everything that the brother said about the keepers was true. According to legend, the children of wizards always inherit the power of at least one of their parents. Therefore, when Eosphere heard that the empire was offering a marriage, she decided that Kvan simply wanted an heir with magic. But the Silver Forest gives the magic of the keepers, and the princess, being the keeper, cannot have children. Standing on the balcony and discussing the current situation, the girl heard a noise at the gate of the palace. The princess rushed to the edge of the balcony to look down, what scared her maid. Downstairs on the main alley, she saw a procession, ahead of which Kvanah Radonsky rode. A surge of emotions swept over the girl, making her heart knock faster. And the next moment, she met with the eyes with Emperor Radon, Kvanah. In anticipation of the ceremony, Eosphere tried to find the answer, how to preserve the union when Kvan finds about its vigility. And of course, the girl was tormented by the question, can she really not be able to prevent the war, no matter how hard she tried? Daiquit did not kill me, as in a past life, but offered to join him, sharing information about the keepers in order to position him. So, he believes that I can benefit and help his plans to be realized. And if I play up my brother, then most likely they will not kill me. Then do not rush. I need to show Kvanahu that I am a good person, and he must find out the secret of the keepers. At that moment, the doors to the chambers of the Eosphere opened, and on the threshold the emperor appeared in a frontline uniform. He took a few steps and restrainedly greeted the girl, indicating a slight bow with her head. "Princess!" Eosphere sincerely answered Kvanah. "Glad to meet, your majesty." Then the emperor held out his hand to the princess, who recoiled a little from surprise. Kvanah delicately touched the girl, expressing confidence and admiring her. His eyes carefully looked at the Eosphere, solving the mood and emotions of the girl. Finally, Kvanah removed his hand and said calmly, "It seems that our future union does not please you." The princess hastily tried to object, but the emperor replied that beautiful words would not hide the lie. And when Eosphere again tried to justify himself, he offered to begin not to contact him in the title. He told a surprised girl that he was not very versed in secular manners, but he did not like your imperial majesty. The princess was completely discouraged by these words of Kvanah. "But you yourself turned to me according to the title." And when she tried to remember whether the emperor talked to her in a past life, he suggested turning to each other by name. Eosphere realized that in a past life, they had not seen before the wedding, so there was no communication between them in advance. The princess felt a surge of emotions when Klanami gently uttered her name, and since the girl continued to be silent, the emperor clarified whether she knew his name. Eosphere tried to understand what was happening to her, so she could only briefly answer the emperor. "Excuse me, Kvan." Meanwhile, the moment came to gather at the ceremony, and the faithful maid Cecilia could not restrain her tears. Standing in front of the mirror in a wedding dress and admiring herself, the princess asked her assistant not to cry. "But it's so sad that you have to get married like this." And continuing to look at herself in the mirror, Eosphere noted that her current wedding dress is still quite unusual. And when Cecilia hugged the princess, bursting with tears, she asked the maid to calm down, saying that she was not going to death, although it seemed to Eosphere not far from the truth, given that being in the Empire, she would risk her life every day. "I will have to hide all the time there, that I can never give Klanah the desired offspring." The princess understood that they were not a couple, although all the time of the ceremony, the emperor gently held her hand in his own. The priest read already familiar words. "Before the gaze of the goddess Fahar, who created this world and destroy it." And Eosphere thought that he and Klanah were more likely enemies who had a chance to encounter a battlefield. After the words that you can kiss the spouse, the groom, like the last time, gently raised the edge of the veil of the bride. And looking at him, the girl caught herself thinking that in her last life, she noticed how beautiful a man in front of her. Eosphere remembered that even then she considered the emperor divinely beautiful, but her eyes saw him during the war. She tried to say to herself that this is not the union of two loving people, but only a means of achieving peace for Achaia. At that moment, Kvan bowed and gently attracted the girl to her. The lips of men and women met in a sweet and hot kiss. From surprise and embarrassment, Yusfir tried to stop her husband. Kvanov looked up from the girl and looked deep into her eyes. Those present at the ceremonies froze without breathing. Watching this moment, only the divot did not express any emotions. As through the fog, the princess heard the question of her husband. "Everything is fine?" And without letting go of the bride, Kvanah Radonsky again uttered her name. Yusfir. At the end of the emperor's ceremony, the emperor quickly began to gather on the return trip, that I even had to cancel the wedding banquet. It seemed to the princess that they left after the wedding even faster than in a past life. The girl looked thoughtfully at the windows of the royal castle of Ake, and her hand mechanically touched the artifact, which gave her the daiquit. He noticed that Yusfir took the artifact with her. "I see that you chose cooperation with me, which means you chose Ake. This is the right decision." But the girl did not share the joy of the crown prince about this. At that moment, the voice of Klanak behind her said that she looks thoughtful and saddened. The emperor noticed the girl watching the training camps to leave and headed for her. The idea that sooner or later Kvain will understand that his wife is barren again did not give the Yusfir of calm. She understood that in this case everything would go to dust, especially if she did not have time to stop the daiquit. The emperor, meanwhile, considered the princess, concerned about her pallor. Then he, without hesitation, said that he would go with her in the carriage. And heading for the imperial crew, he said that he was not worried about the violation of the traditions of the North by this decision, but by the state of his wife. Near the doors of the carriage of the Kvan, he suddenly stood on one knee, holding out his hand with a hand. And then he explained the Yusfir shown by this sight. "I will help you get up. You should hurry, because the subjects will be very surprised to see the emperor on his knees." And all this was very strange, since nothing of the kind happened in a past life. Taking the princess by the hand, Kvanah Radon carefully looked her right in the eye. Using his palm and knee as additional steps, the US sphere easily climbed into the carriage. The princess thought if she experienced such feelings for the emperor in a past life, and is it good or bad, what is happening now? The road along which they were driving was calm and rather monotonous. Yusfir was silent and thought about her, watching the window behind the landscapes. The girl sincerely did not understand what it was about when Kvanov delicately said that she still looks sad. He explained that he could not understand whether she would be unhealthy or she thinks about the escape. The princess indignantly reacted to these words of the emperor. And then she said, "From now on and to the end of centuries, I am your legal wife, and this is my duty." Kvan was expressed by some sarcasm. "Duty? What a devotion! Are all the princesses like that? I suppose to kiss a man who is disgusting to you is also part of your duty?" Yusfir was surprised by this tone. "What is it with you, your majesty? You say as if you think that I hate you." Then Kvan was a little softened, saying that from the moment of their first meeting, he wanted to ask the girl one question. "Tell me, what do you think, princess?" Yusfir was embarrassed and replied that, in her opinion, Kvan, of course, was a hero. "I heard a lot about you, not only about the origin, but also about your achievements." But the emperor interrupted her, saying that he did not need the memorized response of Princess Ake. He is interested in who he was a skatel for the Yusfir. He looked into the girl's eyes. "Is I really a hero for you too?" Yusfir was going to answer Kvanah Radonsky, but was only able to start the phrase, because in her memory, there was an image of the emperor from a past life during a brutal and bloody war. And without waiting for an answer, Kvan concluded, "It seems that my wife is not able to overcome the fear of my husband. Since the ceremony, you are pale and thoughtful, as if everything that happens to you is disgusting." And, turning away to the window, the emperor quietly added, "I expected something like that." The princess excited what he heard. It even seemed to her that Kvan was ready to dissolve this marriage. Jumping to her feet, she tried to object. "This is a misunderstanding, your majesty. It is not at all about you." "What are you doing, princess? Sit in place. At that moment, the horse was frightened, stood on its hind legs, and abruptly stopped the carriage, pulling it to the side. And the girl inside the carriage lost her balance and realized that she was falling without any support. She closed her eyes, and as if from afar, heard Kvan cried out, "Yusfir!" And then the princess opened her eyes and found herself tightly pressed to the broad chest of the emperor. And seeing that she came to her senses, her legitimate husband carefully asked, "You have not hurt?" At that moment, Yusufir realized what it means to feel peace and security. It was completely absorbed in these feelings. The voice of Kvanah returned the girl to reality. "Yusufir!" The emperor once again persistently asked if everything was fine with her and whether his wife was injured. But his question was interrupted in half, since the princess suddenly turned very pale and pressed against him even more. At that moment, the voice from the outside turned to Kvanah. "Your Majesty, are you all right?" The emperor asked the guardsman who appeared in the window of what happened, to which he apologized and explained that the tree suddenly fell, frightening the horse, and the guard would now clear the road. Kvanah was surprised and said that before on this road, nothing happened. But at that moment, he felt that something incomprehensible was happening to the girl in his hands. The princess was on the verge of consciousness, and her whole body was beaten by a small trembling. Daiquat said that the magic of the keepers belongs to the Silver Forest, so they cannot use it outside the Ahe. Yusufir hoped that his brother lied to her, but the princess felt that magic really leaves her. "In this state, I can't do anything if they attack us." And the familiar voice of the ghost of himself, from a past life, sarcastically asked if his brother stopped the carriage on the road in the forest. After all, it was Daiquat from the very beginning planned to kill you, and under this pretext to start a war. Poor Yusufir, you will again die, unable to influence anything. The princess tried her best to isolate herself from this unpleasant voice in her head. And again, the voice of Kvanah Radonsky, who called her by name, helped her return to reality. The girl opened her eyes and pressed her husband even more tightly, and the man pressed a sphere to himself and spoke quietly. "Breathe deeper. Everything is in order. Nothing terrible happened." Then the princess allowed herself to relax and cried from an excess of feelings and emotions. And Kvanah quietly but convincingly told her that no one and nothing could harm her anymore. Meanwhile, the motorcade continued his journey. The carriage swayed measuredly, and gradually Yusufir calmed down in her husband's arms, after which she herself did not notice how she almost fell asleep, forgetting all the troubles. After some time, closer to the night, the motorcade arrived in the port city. Yusufir woke up, and Kvanah unexpectedly asked the princess for forgiveness, which surprised the girl once again. Noticing this, he explained that he probably behaved very rudely towards her in most cases. The emperor lowered his eyes and said, "It just seemed to me, the Yusufir, that I was disgusting to you. I knew very well that a woman like you would hardly like this whole idea with a sudden wedding. But no, you can consider me a hero or someone else. I will not dissolve this marriage." And the emperor promised that the peace agreement between Ahea and Radon would remain in force, then added, "So you may not be afraid of me, at least not so much." Yusufir was shocked, and it seemed to her that she began to understand what feelings she was experiencing for this person. Indeed, in a past life, they could not communicate alone with each other. And only now, on the road, the girl found out what kind of man, Kvanah Radonsky. The princess replied to the emperor that everything she knew about his achievements and exploits was not a lie, since before dating she studied a large number of documentary information about the Emperor Radon. And initially, she read about his path and accomplishment only in order to know what to beware. But she found out that he saved people from the tyranny of the emperor and freed oppressed slaves. The more she found out, the more it seemed to her that Kvanah is not the same as rumors said about him. Remembering all this, Yusufir sincerely said that she was not afraid of him, and she was not hated by their marriage. The field of which she added, "And by the way, I thank you for the help of me recently rendered, Quanch." Yusufir was embarrassed, seeing his reaction to the appeal not according to the title, and, smiling, recalled that this was his initiative. The emperor was so moved by her revelation that it seemed temporarily lost speech. At that moment, the motorcade stopped, and the guardsman loudly reported to the emperor, "Your Majesty, we are in place." And the enthusiastic Usfir saw that they arrived in the port. She clung to the carriage window, trying to consider everything that surrounded them. Yusufir had never been to the sea before, so the girlfriend of the girl had no bounds. The picture, which opened her eyes, said that the future has nevertheless changed. "I have not died in a carriage, and the war between Akaya and Radon has not yet begun." Now she only had to deal with her feelings. But the princess had confidence that now everything would be fine. At the pier on the waves, a huge imperial sailboat swayed. On board, leaving the cabin and adjusting the tie, the young man said indignantly, "What does His Majesty think about?" He was emotional. Last month he told me about his future wife, and then literally escaped from Akaya immediately after the wedding. His assistant calmly reported. The Baron, according to the report, their carriage is already approaching. They have just traveled the forest. The Baron threw the coat deeper over his shoulders and concluded that in this case they should go ashore. He was eager to meet the Emperor and look at the new Empress. The picture that Yusfer saw when she left the carriage overwhelmed her. Kavani gave her a hand and asked me to be careful, because it was already completely dark. But the princess selflessly replied that she sees everything perfectly and took a step on the pavement. And at the same moment, the girl stumbled on the uneven surface of the stone. She screamed in fright, feeling that she was falling, but the Emperor's strong hand grabbed her. And the next instant, Yusfer was in the arms of her husband. The husband looked at her with care, which forced the girl to whisper excuses and gratitude. Kvanah took her hand, and with the second hand, he softly but confidently acquired by the shoulder, insisting that they would go further just like that. Yusfer was pleasantly struck by the concern of the Emperor. She tried to say that nothing terrible happened, but the man did not obey. At that moment, 3 came out of the darkness, one of which greeted the Emperor. "Your Majesty!" Kvanah, delighted, greeted him in response. "Aslin!" And Yusfer was surprised. "Is it the same?" Seeing the reaction of the girl, the young man came to his senses and apologized that he did not introduce himself right away. He bowed politely and said, "Baron Aslin Bainar is at your service, Empress. Once the Oslina family once lived in poverty, but he was able to return her wealth, thanks to his skills and instincts." Ignoring the status, Aslin saw the true essence in people, and Kvanah noticed when he was still an ordinary combat slave. He acted as a strategist and advisor to the future emperor during the revolution, and now he was one of the most influential people in the country. Yusfer remembered that when I was looking for information about Kvanah, the name of Baron Aslin was often mentioned in scrolls. For her, it was as amazing as to meet a character from the book. Meanwhile, the Baron politely asked Yusfer, "Can I help something, Your Majesty?" The girl was embarrassed, and Kvanah said that Aslin enters his close circle and also rightfully holds a position in the Ministry of the Interior. In response, the princess also politely introduced herself. "Very nice, Sir Aslin, Yusfer Katatel, and now Radon." Hearing the last note of the girl, the Emperor was pleasantly surprised and even froze, comprehending these words, to which Aslin easily pushed Kvanah and recalled that it was time to climb on board. The Emperor tried to hug his wife again. "I will help you go, the Yusfer," but she objected. "I can go myself, Kvanah." The surrounding spouses, people with interest, and light perplexity watched their dispute. Is the imperial couple already so close that it turns to each other by name? Yusfer was recalled first, realizing that in the presence of servants, such behavior does not correspond to etiquette. She quietly apologized to Kvanah, to which he loudly stated that his wife had the right to name him by name when he wanted. Baron Aslin recalled etiquette, but the Emperor abruptly interrupted him, recalling that he himself had just addressed him by name. Suddenly, the situation was heated, as Kvanah was flared up because of Aslin's words, and in a sharp tone explained his place to the assistant. The girl remembered the Emperor's attention to his road when he apologized as soon as he realized that she was not good, and also the fact that as soon as she stumbled out of the carriage, the attention of Kvanah instantly switched only to her, and realizing that the husband defends her, and not himself, Yusfer decided to take the situation into her own hands. "Kvanah!" The dispute was interrupted, and the girl feverishly tried to come up with the reason for his complete stop. "It seems that my head is dizzy. We can already go, please." Kvanah instantly forgot about Donkey, switching his attention to his spouse. He went to the princess and apologized for temporarily distracted his attention from her. After that, saying that he intends to take the Yusfer to her chambers, Kvanah easily grabbed the girl in her arms. Aslin, watching this, said quietly that it would not be worth going so far, and his assistants simply froze in bewilderment. And in the night silence all the way to the pier, only the slurred objections of the girl, dissatisfied with the movement, were heard. Soon, the procession climbed aboard the imperial sailboat, and Kvanah brought the princess to a spacious cabin. He delicately put the U-sphere on his feet and said that if she needs something, it is enough to report. Then he asked, "You have a red face. Is there a temperature by chance?" U-sphere instantly reported that everything is fine with her, without specifying that the complexion was caused by shyness from such close attention. And at that moment, the girl noticed a beautiful dress laid out on the bed. She was a loud surprised where it was here, and Kvan took it in his own way. "Don't you like it?" U-sphere hastened to assure her husband that the dress is great and that she loves this color very much. The princess thought about herself. Did someone give me such a beautiful dress at least ever? I would like to thank the person who made me such a wonderful gift. Kvanah replied that this was not necessary, because this dress is from him. This fact made the girl be embarrassed and blushing again. "Well, thank you, I will wear it." And the emperor, as a true man, emphasized that these are trifles, just a home dress for his wife. Then Kavanov said that since it was too late, the U-sphere could rest, and he will return, having finished urgent affairs. U-sphere clarified whether he would return to this cabin, and the emperor replied that it was obvious, since they are now a wife. Then he added that the spouses should live together. The princess realized that she had not thought about this moment of marital life, and from this day they will live in the same room. This circumstance forced us to recall another side of family life. Will we really spend our first wedding night here? Of course, she understood that this day sooner or later would have come, because now he and Klanast's wife. But the princess hoped that this would happen at least after their arrival in the Empire of Radon, when the moment comes to become the full wife of the emperor. It seemed that Kvan was in a hurry with the duties of family life too much. She tried to understand whether her legal spouse really liked, and at the same time, the girl scolded herself for imagination and doubt. Although I understood that the sooner the wedding night comes, the sooner it turns out that it was barren. The emperor seems to have read all these thoughts on his wife's face and understood her condition. He gently raised her head and carefully looked at the princess. After that, Kvan bowed to the princess, as if he wanted to consider something in her eyes, and then very tenderly and warmly kissed the girl on the lips. I will explain. The U-sphere, that we stay in the same room, does not mean that there will be something between us. I just thought that since we are now spouses, it would be strange to live in different rooms. Do not be afraid, princess. I will not touch you and my finger. I give the word, the emperor. I also think that this place is not the most suitable for our first wedding night. And besides, I'm not going to sleep with a woman who does not even want me. I assure you, U-sphere, that nothing of the kind will happen without your consent. And the girl, shocked by this confession, uncertainly asked how so, because he should want the heirs? To which Kvan was a little relaxed, and jokingly stated that he was flattered by the fact that his wife was thinking about such things from the first day. And he added that there is definitely nowhere to rush to them in this matter. If you are really worried about the heir, U-sphere, then at least pretend that you love me. Let our marriage now be fictitious, but I hope that in the future we will become a real couple. These words of the emperor became another discovery for U-sphere in the understanding of Kvanah Radonsky as a man. Meanwhile, the imperial sailboat was already far into the sea, heading towards the Empire of Radon. It was quite late, but Kvan was sitting in his working cabin, pondering everything that happened between him and the princess. He tried his best to understand what was happening in the soul of his legal wife. Her question about the heirs actually deeply struck the emperor, although he did not show it. Attempts to think over the strategy for building relationships caused a colossal tension in Quanah. He realized that family life was much more complicated than he initially expected. The Klanak's reasoning was suddenly interrupted by the loud voice of Baron Oslin. He burst into the office. "Why didn't you tell me that you are going to help Ahi with the strengthening of their borders? We didn't even discuss this. We took their keeper, which inflicted a serious blow to the defense of the country, and I just returned the debt." The Baron objected that he did not understand this marriage. Much easier to conquer Ahu than to send his soldiers to them for some princess. These words aroused anger among the emperor. "Be careful with words, Oslin. For me, the U-sphere is not just a princess from a small kingdom. Help with the army is negligible in comparison with the fact that I am ready to give it to be near." Oslin said that Kvan simply lost his head, to which the emperor advised him to cool down and not incur anger. In the big cabin where the princess saved, it was quiet. The calm sea measuredly swayed the imperial ship. Suddenly, U-sphere woke up, feeling a sharp nausea, and sat on the bed. She could not understand what was happening, and for what reason she became ill. The girl decided that these could be the consequences of a loss of magic. But the princess did not want Kvanah to notice that she had lost her strength. Yusufir decided to cope with this and headed for the door to ask for something from the maid. But in the doorway, she suddenly met Kvanah, who immediately noticed that his wife was not good. And, despite the girl's assurances that everything is in order with her, the man noted her pale look and offered to call a doctor. At that moment, the girl felt a sharp attack of nausea, although she did not eat anything the day before. Yusufir tried to pull herself together, but it turned out to be impossible. She grabbed the emperor so as not to fall, and she suddenly was sick. The man helped the girl resist her feet, holding her until the attack ended. When Yusufir came to her senses a little, she saw with horror that there was another serious trouble. The girl scaredly raised her eyes to her husband, waiting for an angry reaction, since the bright shirt of Emperor Radonsky was hopelessly spoiled. Kvanah calmly examined the affected item of his wardrobe, and then he told the girl that it was for this reason that it was worth calling the doctor. At this moment, the poor princess was seized with a small feverish tremor. Yusufir's eyes widened, and she focused in an attempt to cope with another misfortune. Before the eyes of the girl, everything swam, and she hardly held her balance. The princess uncertainly tried to apologize to the emperor. "Excuse me, Kvanah, how I dared to do that." In her head, the thought was spinning that she already showed herself rather painful from the very beginning, and now confirmed it with a sudden attack. The girl was worried that now Kvanah would definitely get angry and understand that he still should not marry her, and the ghost's malicious voice of the Yusufir, from a past life, began to be mockingly whipping that she finally ruined everything. "Is it really so difficult to please the emperor? Because you can't even use magic anymore." The ghost did not calm down. "What a reckless you are, Yusufir." Then the princess gathered with strength and said, "I will take responsibility, Kvanah, whatever you decide." He was surprised. What responsibility? Because nothing actually happened. And to the words of the girl about the spoiled shirt, Kvanah unexpectedly, in one confident movement, took off this item of clothes. Then he said with satisfaction, "You see, now everything is in order. There is no guilt in what happened. The princess and the dirty clothes can be removed, and the problem will disappear." Yusufir said uncertainly to her husband, "But because of me, your mood has deteriorated." And Kvanah, fastening the buttons of a fresh shirt, was again surprised. "Why did you get it?" He said that he was angry with a person who became a victim of marine illness, the top of stupidity, so he was completely calm. Just in case, the man checked whether the girl had no temperature, put the backside of the palm to her forehead. Kvanah, on the contrary, admitted that it was his fault when he forgot that the Yusufir on the ship was for the first time. The incident was rather the result of his indiscretion, so the man suggested simply forgetting about it. To relax his wife a little, he decided to tell the story of how he went next to the battlefield in his youth. Then Kvanah was pursued by one Gifor guy who wanted to join the revolution. This guy spoke ardent speeches that he would follow Kvanah until the end of his life and was ready to even die for him. But while they walked past the field and talked, this guy came across a head body, and then, unable to restrain himself, since such a nightmare spectacle was a novelty for him, the guy was sick right on Kvanah. Having made an intriguing pause, the emperor asked the girl can imagine who the guy was. It turned out that the second hero of this story was none other than Aslan. He found all this insanely nasty. This did not fit in the head of the Yusufir with the image of the emperor's assistant, that she thought that she misunderstood everything. But the brunette confirmed that they think about the same donkey, his right hand. A little grudgingly, recalling this situation from the past, Kvanah said that Aslan did not even apologize properly. On the contrary, a guy with green hair said that it was Kvanah who should apologize for showing him this horror. The girl grinned briefly, covering her mouth with her hand. This story really drove off her experiences. She, smiling brightly, said that she would never have thought that the Baron also has such a side. The man's heart missed a blow when he saw his wife sincerely smiled at him. He considered her charming. Taking himself in his hands, Kvanah said that, be that as it may, a lot of time passed, and Aslan does not even remember this. Therefore, he was sure that Yusufir would forget about this awkward situation only after a couple of floating. These were trifles. The Empress was struck that the husband was so sweet and restrained, and considered what happened only to little things. She was sincerely surprised that, comparing the situations, for Kvanah, that marine illness, that a severed head, were trifles. It was scary to imagine what the guy's life was, since such a cruel spectacle seemed to him a trifle. Now, traveling with him, Yusfir was glad that Kvanah could recognize the present, and not his image of a tyrant and despot. In the deck, towards the cabin of the marital couple of rulers, the young guy fled, clearly in a hurry. He slowed down and stopped only just before the entrance. With a trembling hand, he knocked on the door. Kvanah, just by knocking on the door, guessed who was from the guest. Obviously, he was waiting for the appearance of a subject. Yusfir, unlike him, did not suspect that someone could help for them now. The emperor cursed that the subject was going to come to them for so long, but the Uiafir stood up, saying that he could sleep. Kvanah allowed the guy to enter, and he, a little shy and uncertainly, looked inside, apologizing for being late. The brunette ordered to stop making excuses and inspect the empress. For red-haired, it was an honor to get acquainted with the Yusfir. The girl was struck by the fact that, to inspect her, it was reacted to this guy who was even younger than her. The main doctor of the imperial palace was Simon, a red-haired young man with glasses with a round frame. He looked at a pair of rulers in confusion, preparing to start inspection. He was still a child, but, despite the little age, the boy deserved his position. He turned to the empress. Only this appeal was able to derive the fare. Haired out of her thoughts, she did not notice how she looked at Simon. The girl introduced herself to him and smiled, saying that she was very pleased to meet him. She also thanked him for coming so early. The guy assured that this did not cause inconvenience. Kvanah, but he has a hobby, wound up, and irritably rushed a slow doctor. Yusfir asked her husband not to put pressure on the boy so much, because she was in order. Kvanah was a little resting. Simon knelt down in front of the empress, examining her, still in tension due to the behavior of the ruler. The blonde, with a little sad, noticed that the poor young man was already shaking with fear of the emperor. To dilute the stop a little, and to quench interest, the empress asked Simon how old he was. The guy replied that year he was performed 18. Yusfir noted that he was the same age as her younger brother. She said that since Simon is so young, and already works in the palace, then he must be a real genius. He did not agree. Yusfir stood her own. The emperor would not appoint an ignorant person for such a responsible position. She turned to her husband and wanted him to confirm her words. Kvanah agreed with the blonde. Despite the appearance, Simon had a good memory and great ingenuity. The man added that, let the red and young, he could come in handy, so the emperor took him into the palace. Yusfir drew the guy's attention to the fact that even the emperor says that he was capable, so Simon may not be nervous. The words of the emperor and empress very inspired the doctor, and he thanked them for their support. Simon told the ruler that so far he is not good enough, but from now on he would try his best. He took the girl's hand and, inspired by the faith in him of the imperial family, said that they could call him at any time. In response to his determination, Simon received sincere gratitude. Kvanah looked at them with an unread look. He averted his eyes, obviously displeased with something, but was not angry, but rather was in a slight confusion. When the doctor left, Kvanah voiced that Simon was not the most talkative person, but he seemed to like the Yusfir. She said that it was excellent, and, noticing his confusion, explained that the empress should be close to the people. The emperor, noticeably jealous, sarcastically asked whether they also held their hands with Simon by the hands to get closer. The sudden discontent of her husband surprised her, because she did not even think that this action would be regarded incorrectly. Yusfir apologized for not thinking, forced the brunette to feel uncomfortable. The man assured that everything was in order, and he said this was not to apologize. Yusfir recalled that Simon was almost the same age as her younger brother, so she just felt sorry for the doctor. Therefore, the fact that they held hands was an act of support, as the fact that Kvanah was then hugged her in a carriage. Then she realized that the warmth of someone else's body could help to calmly calm down and recover. That is why, noticing Simon's excitement, she wanted to share this with him, but she promised that he would continue to be careful. Kvanah was extremely delighted with how generous and Mila was his chosen one, but did not tell her about it. He handed the Eusphere a small red berry, encouraging the girl to open her mouth and let him eat. The Empress asked why this. The brunette explained that he thought that the medicine that Simon gave her was bitter and wanted to kill an unpleasant taste. The girl realized that it was dried raspberries and joyfully said that she was her favorite berry. Kvanah, pleased that he had pleased the blonde, handed her a glass of raspberries and offered to eat in this case yet. The delighted Usfir clarified in a man whether she could eat her all, and he replied that they had a lot of raspberries. He leaned closer, and with a smile noticed that the fair-haired seemed to be not a rabbit, but eat so little. They met their eyes, and for a few moments lingered in this position, looking at each other's eyes. Then Kvanah got up from the couch and said that soon the Usfir would become easier. Therefore, as soon as she went to bed, it was too late. The wife asked him if he was also going to bed, but the emperor replied that he still needed to work. Whether he would go to her question again, he replied that he would not leave her sick and alone. He has the necessary documents with him. Light because of the lunar rays, the sky was reflected in the sea surface. Kvanah promised to look after the girl while she was sleeping. After that, he lit a candle and settled down at a low wooden table in their cabin, laying the documents on the countertop. The fair-haired man lay down in bed, but the dream still did not come to her. She looked at her working husband. She was very pleased to realize that he remained in the room for her, only so that she could relax calmly. Even if Usfir behaved in disagreement, Kvanah still was not angry with her. On the contrary, he was worried and worried. Usfir wondered if the reason was that the emperor would like their relationship to become real. She even allowed the possibility that if she retains the marriage and prevents the war, they could try. But positive thoughts suddenly broke off as soon as the figure of her evil brother, calling her name, would appear in them. A relative's voice sounded in my head, ridiculating her hopes for a good future and grandiose plans. Fingers involuntarily squeezed the sheet due to the nerves. She remembered that if suddenly she became useless, then she would be thrown away. So far, Kvanah could have been a sweet one with her, but as soon as it turns out that she is barren, her past life will remind of herself. She tried to calm the trembling in everything, and, clinging my eyes, pull herself together and calm down. Usfir admitted that she had lost his vigilance. If the emperor learned about her weakness, the girl would have had a bad one. As if trying to steal from her own obsessive thoughts, the blonde hid a blanket with her head and tried to fall asleep. Kvanah noticed this, distracting from his lesson. He squinted at the girl to make sure that everything was in order. She did not move anymore, but the man continued to drill her with an attentive look from the other end of the room. The rest of the night passed relatively calmly, and after a while, the ship met a pleasant, sunny morning. When it dawned, the Empress woke up, taking a sitting position on the bed and rubbing his eyes. The first thing she did was looked around. She noted in confusion that her wife was not in the cabin. Soon, the arbitrariness of the ruler was noticed by the maid. She was worried about whether Her Majesty was in order after the night. Usfir smiled radiantly to the woman and replied that she was in order, and the rest definitely benefited her. In addition, the Empress did not want to spend all the time on the ship in the room, so she was heading to the deck. As soon as she went upstairs, she felt a refreshing breeze that she disheveled her light curls. The enthusiastic look of emerald eyes appeared an amazing view of the open sea. She had never seen this before. Usfir could not break away and studied each element of the landscape that opened on the horizon. Here is what the sea it is. At that moment, the guards of the ship approached her, greeting Her Majesty in chorus. She greeted them in response. As expected, the Imperials treated her a little wary. She felt it yesterday when meeting with Aslan. If you think about it, it was logical. Indeed, for them, the Eusphere is nothing more than just an unknown stranger. The Empire of Radon, at the head of which Kvanah, was founded relatively recently. The empire was progressive, but still not stable enough due to its recent education. Instead of introducing a sorceress into the clan, the emperor should marry an aristocrat from his country. Such a decision would help strengthen the power of Kvanah, but for some reason, he decided to act differently. The whole empire wondered who their ruler chooses, and then the Eusphere appeared, the princess of the little northern country. This choice of the empress was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Therefore, their attitude is quite understandable and explainable. In a hay, the blonde saved her status of the keeper, thanks to which she got the respect of the subjects, but not in Radon. From thoughtful, the girl brought out a sudden and loud scream. Someone began to call her and obviously approach. The excited Simon ran out of the cabin, who hastily said that he was looking for her. Yusfir told him that yesterday's medicine helped her a lot. The doctor was worried that she could catch a cold from behind the wind. Suddenly, behind the red-haired Kvanah, who said menacingly that he should not reach a cold, he came closer to his wife and said that since she was not in the room, he decided to look for her on the ship. Kvanah, without much effort, picked up a fair-haired man in his arms and invited her to return to the bedroom. She did not have time to object. The Emperor and the Chosen One retired, despite the requests of Yusfir to let her go. Only then did Simon exhale in relief. The Empress was indignant that her husband was again carrying her in her arms in her eyes, and he asked that she was bothering her in this. He suggested that this was due to non-compliance with etiquette, but Yusfir said that she was simply worried about his reputation. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of their cabin and said that he had forgotten something. The man approached his wife's face and mysteriously continued his thought, thinking that she should have told her about this before. He admitted that he became an emperor in order to be able to act as he wanted, without fear of reputation. He did not like that people had to drive themselves into the framework of etiquette and obey the authorities, so he carried out reforms. The brunette carefully put the girl on the bed. He assured her that the people who looked down on him had long left, and the remaining people respected their emperor too much to condemn him for anything. While they were talking, Yusfir accidentally noticed a couple of unusual books next to her on the bed. The girl took one of them in her hands and examined the cover, asking what kind of book it was. She did not blame her before. The man said that he thought that she would just sit in the room, would be bored, so he brought several books while she was sleeping. The journey was a long time, so before sailing, he took some books from the palace library in advance. Kvanah carefully asked whether the Empress chose the books he'd chosen or not. She vanishingly assured that she likes. Yusfir was delighted, because she loved to read very much, but recently she had no free time for this. The Empress suggested that her wife read together, and he could not refuse her in any way. She read one book and thought that in a he, even her passage was difficult to find, not like such a good copy. Yusfir heard that the Imperial Library is the largest on the continent. Apparently, Kvanah also liked to read. The better she recognized her husband, the more surprised at what the man really was. She thought that he would not be too interesting for reading, because he literally grew up on the battlefield. But it turned out that no. She laughed softly. She was amused by how serious Kvanah looked when so focused. Reading was the only enthusiasm for Usfir, even in a past life. She spent most of her time alone. Then the book successfully helped her cope with this feeling. Thanks to the invented worlds, she forgot about her problems, but now an amazing feeling overtook her, to share with someone what is expensive for her. It was unusual, but nice. Thinking about how great it would be to live so peacefully in an empire with Kvanah, the girl imperceptibly fell into a dream. After a while, the emperor woke her cautiously, calling in a whisper and shaking his shoulder. After a sudden daytime sleep, the girl tried to understand what happened and why her husband suddenly woke her up. The man told her that they had arrived, and the girl's sleep was like a hand. She could not believe it. Their ship finally stopped at the port. It was time to go to the imperial palace. The carriage in which the emperor and the empress were calmly moving along the streets of the city, heading to the palace. Yusfir asked Kvanah whether everything would be fine. He did not even greet his subjects to return. The girl said that since he returned with the marriage union, in the case of Ahe, the people would have been waiting for her with trepidation and impatience. He replied that a few days later, he would speak with a welcoming speech, and the Yusfir will simply be nearby. And then he would like to officially introduce Usfir after a grand wedding that they will arrange here. He asked if he understands correctly that the marriage in Ahe was simply a formality for them. Kovan down the line, saying that his people to get to know the empress after their wedding. Then subjects could see the Yusfir in all its glory. Meanwhile, they arrived at the destination. The imperial palace was really huge and incredibly beautiful. The subjects joyfully greeted them with respect. While Kvanah was excommunicated, the main maid, named Marianne, introduced herself to the empress, like other maids. Mariana said that she would do everything in her power, even if she is not good enough for us fear. The empress was embarrassed. Other maids left, and Mariana invited the ruler to follow her. The maid wanted to show her the palace. Following the maid and examining the palace from the inside, the Usfir noticed that the Radon Empire developed surprisingly quickly. It is a pity that it is easier for people to call Kvanah a barbarian than to recognize his merits as a ruler, that he has achieved such progress. While they passed one of the long corridors of the palace, the blonde noticed one unusual structure in the window. Marianne explained that this building was built recently, so it looks so beautiful. The maid asked Her Majesty to visit him. Usfir politely abandoned the offer. Nevertheless, it looked exactly like the palace in which she lived in Ahi. This was madly surprising. The girl carefully examined him, but they did not linger for a long time near the window and went further along the corridor. The maid proposed to hold the empress into the main palace. The second floor was intended for future heirs, but the next room, in which Mariana brought the fair-haired, was the chambers of the empress. The woman sincerely hoped that the ruler would like her new house, and the room could not help but like. It was equipped with luxurious furniture and, in general, incredibly sophisticated. Mariana suggested that the empress would get tired after a long road, so she ordered to prepare a bath in advance. The maid said that she would remind the maids to pay special attention to the preparation of the chambers, while the Usfir was looking at the bed. The empress turned to a woman and asked what kind of preparation is required. It seemed to her that everything was ready. She was asked whether this will be the first joint night of the emperor and the empress in the palace. It was so the maids were especially tried on cleaning, which Kvanah also noticed, returning to the room in the evening. Even the atmosphere in the chambers has become different. Usfir told her wife that they all equipped Goraniki. Kvanah also remembered that this was their first joint night in the palace and asked if the girl was so dressed. A fair-haired man, with worriedly, uncomfortably, shrugged, according to the reaction of the emperor, thinking that this dress did not go. The man took an embarrassed look and said that on the contrary, it was very going on, and that was the problem. He recalled that he himself said that there would be nothing between them, until the Usfir herself wants it. That is why every time it was difficult for him to restrain himself, so as not to cross the empress's personal boundaries. Kvanah, heading for the bed, said that they were tired, so he believed that the best decision was to go to bed rather. Suddenly, Usfir decided to apologize that sometimes it could seem stupid, because romantic relations were new to her. The emperor admitted that he is not very different from her. Usfir was also the first with him, which very surprised her. The man asked if he was surprising that he had no experience in relations with girls, or perhaps the former princess of Ahe simply preferred more experienced men. The fair-haired woman was driven into a dead end and froze, not finding suitable words to answer these questions. The brunette said that they could agree on everything else, but apparently the lack of experience was an incorrigible problem. After assurances that this is not a problem, Kvanah said that, it turns out, they both did not know how the wedding night should go. He offered to practice, embarrassing his wife with such a wording. And for starters, he just took her hand. The man did not try to rush events, and sensitively said that if the Usfir was ready, they could lie together on the bed. The fair-haired woman was a little bewildered because of this behavior of the emperor, and thought about how it was worth doing. She eventually hinted that she was not against lying together, but for this, she needed to change into a more convenient dress. The girl hurried to the exit and informed that she would move into the next room to change the outfit. Kvanah stopped her, reminding her that behind the butt of the buttons on the dress, and she herself would not be able to unfasten them. Trying to inadvertently not to look at the girl, the man shyly asked if he could help her with buttons. Usfir agreed, and they sat together on the edge of the bed, both feeling a small lump of excitement in the chest. Carefully tinging the buttons with his fingers, the young emperor unbuttoned them one after another, weakening the dress. The dark fabric fell a little on the girl's shoulders, exposing a pale back. Brunette informed that he had finished. The empress embarrassedly thanked her husband, feeling his cheeks more and more noticeably flooded with scarlet paint. Kvanah, slightly bewildered because of his indecision, replied that there was nothing to thank him for. After some time, Usfir returned to the room in a new dress, and they both went into the same bed. preparing for bed. The girl felt a little awkward because of the dress. Usually she was helped with this maid, and here, Kavan. She was lying to her husband with her back. But when she heard his question about the training, she immediately turned to face him. The brunette calmly held out her palm and said that if she was lying so far, he could not hold her hand. The girl forgot a little about the planned training, but now she lay down a little closer, uncertainly raising one hand. She took his palm in her, and the man carefully squeezed her brush with her fingers, feeling pleasant warmth. Yusfer asked her wife, "Unless he was Nilovko. They are in the same bed. Everything happened so suddenly." The girl also said that on the ship they slept in different rooms, but Kavayan said that she was wrong. It turns out that they slept in the same room, just a girl in bed, and he is in a chair next to her so as not to embarrass. In another room, he left only to change clothes or take a bath. The Empress did not understand what such sacrifices were for. The man depressedly remembered how his chosen one dreamed of some nightmares with the participation of her older brother. Kovanov carefully looked after her, straightened her hair, and tried to calm through his dream, and it seems it turned out. The Emperor briefly retold those nights when she dreamed of bad dreams and what happened later. Brunette explained his concern and victims by promising that he would be nearby until the girl could sleep calmly. She thoughtfully replied to him that Kvan was really not at all the same as she imagined him from stories. To be honest, before the wedding, Yusfir was even a little afraid of her fiancé. She was scared by his strength in battles and cruelty. She believed the rumors in which the Kvanah was exposed with a tyrant and a cruel revolutionary, but now she did not think so clearly. The only thing that excited her a little, that she could not like it. The husband suddenly touched her cheek. Kovan admitted that he really liked the girl, and he did not spare a drop that he married her. Now and henceforth, he promised that he would always need only her, that she would be his only chosen one, forever. The fair-haired man could not believe her happiness, because Kavan also liked it madly. Although her heart fluttered when the man said that he needed her, the girl understood that it was impossible to forget. He probably liked her, but the keeper, bearing her name, he needed only her strength. With these gloomy thoughts, the Empress fell asleep, but the morning took all the anxieties with her, and she happily woke up. Very soon after the wake of the Yusfir, Marianne came to her and asked her first night in the palace passed. Blonde said pretty that fragrant herbs helped her fall asleep, and now she felt very kind. Marianne was glad of this, and bowing, asked if the Empress had any more wishes. Although the maid was very polite and teaching, the fair-haired felt as if the maid was afraid of her. And let the anxiety did not give the Empress the rest. She decided that it was a waste of time to fall into despondency and to be sad. The girl asked her to be given some quick breakfast because she wanted to go somewhere. Mariana asked her where she gathered, and the blonde replied that she was in the Imperial Library. Hastily having breakfast, the Yusfer soon ended up in the desired place. The library delighted with its size. The enthusiastic Yusfir asked the workers from where they got so many books. They replied that their library is incredibly diverse. In addition to rare copies of books, they presented verses and legends of stray Poles, whose works were only oral. The Empress asked if they had something about the history of magicians, and the employee replied that he was, but in a special secret department. But, since the Yusfir was the wife of their emperor, she was allowed to look into the secret section anyway. Having decided to take advantage of her privilege, the girl said that she was going to go there right now. She thought that in this department, it would be able to find the rarest of existing books, and this very inspired and delighted. Perhaps she could even find some key to the secret of the keeper if she was very lucky. Suddenly, the gaze of a fair-haired man caught on one interesting book, which seemed to stand out against the background of everyone else. Her spirit intercepted. She had long dreamed of reading this book and finally found it. Yusfir took the book that interested her from the shelf and comfortably tripled in the reading room, opening it. She thought that the heyday of the era of wizards happened several centuries ago, so she did not expect to find tips. But, contrary to her expectations, she found a book about the history of the genus and the emergence of magic on the northern continent. She heard that they were still actively using magic. The girl opened the book and began to read enthusiastically. Yusfir wanted to hope that the pages say more about the keepers than people were known. Getting deep into reading, she found a fragment that narrated about the case that had happened more than 300 years ago. Then the horror itself invaded the earth, bringing with it ruthless chaos and destruction. The human family and the serene bed of the silver forest, guarded by God, were in danger. And then, having heard the desperate scream of the forest, the representative of the family Katatel came to the call. It was a brave, fair-haired girl who was not afraid to look in the face of danger for the sake of a good goal. The girl, who was called Genesia, entered the battle and vowed to protect the forest until the end of the century. The goddess Fahar was happy and in gratitude endowed the clan Katator with a special gift. But with the flesh of the human, they could not bear the power of God, so the keeper's soul was tied to the silver forest. The book described everything that Yusfir already knew. But one interesting fact was described about Genez Katatel. The forces of the Genesis went beyond human capabilities, and the forest elves blessed her child. These lines were very surprised by the Yusfir, since their history textbooks said that Geneza was an ordinary keeper. She could not understand how the child could be, and why she was called the eternal friend of the forest elves. The Empress thought that it would be nice to meet the elves to learn more about Genez, but where to find them? While she read, her husband came to the blonde. He called her from the other end of the hall, and she had to interrupt. Kvan stood in the doorway and carefully examined his chosen one. He asked why she was still there. The couple agreed to take a walk together, so they left the library together. On the street by that time, it was already dark. Kvanah was worried that she missed dinner and excited everyone that she had never returned to the chambers for the whole day. The girl did not expect her absence could cause so much anxiety both in her husband and maids. The fair-haired guiltily looked at the emperor and apologized. She read and did not notice how time flew. Kvanah touched a little that his wife was so reckless, but her soft gaze was confusing him. Yusfir asked if he was angry with her due to what happened, realizing that he had the right to express his discontent. The brunette replied that he was not angry and apologized for the fact that his presentations could sound quite rudely. He did not blame the girl at all for her desire to spend more time in the library. He was only pleased with her hobby. It was just that Kvan was worried, because the Empress had not the strongest health, and she did not care at all about herself. In fact, he expected that this would happen at least once, because she liked reading so much. He said that in this case, it was possible for him to pay more attention to this. Kvanah reached forward, closer to his wife's lips, but stopped himself from this action in time, pulling away. The Yusfir was embarrassed and a little bewildered due to such a reaction, not quite understanding whether he was disappointed. Meanwhile, Kvanah brought her to an unknown girl, and opening the door, joyfully invited her to go inside. Before their eyes opened a view of a chic, large room with long rows of plants and a fountain in the center. The emperor hoped that at least the desire to see the greenhouse could push it more often to go outside. The girl looked at the plants with interest, gently holding the buds between her fingers. She really liked these flowers. She was delighted with how beautiful it was in the greenhouse and how many different plants were in it. She considered it delightful. To the question of Klanok, whether she likes, she confidently replied that yes, especially small flowers like those that I have indicated. The emperor admitted that he was very glad that he managed to raise his beloved mood. He asked her to look here, admire the flowers, and not forget to take care of his diet. Kvan ordered the subjects to plant flowers around the new building and hoped that the empress would like here. Yusfir only now realized that the building that was a copy of her house and the greenhouse was built recently. She was to the core, struck by the fact that both Kvan was built specifically for her arrival. No one has ever done such attentive acts in her direction, and then there are also so expensive. She could not understand why Kvan continued to take care of her so much. But suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by something unexpected. From one of the flowers, she felt strange fluctuations in magic. Kavani noticed that the girl was unexpectedly alert and began to peer into the flowers and asked her all in order. The flowers were so beautiful that the empress simply could not look away from them. It seemed to her that since she left Akaya, then magic was completely inaccessible to her. But perhaps she could even talk to the flower. Yusfir carefully held out her hand to the bud, thinking that nothing bad would happen if she still tries. She carefully touched the petals with her finger, the lifetime, the connection with the plant, and suddenly she did it. But, to her great surprise, The flower was alarmed and shouted plaintively, fearing something very much. He asked why Yusufir came here and did not understand why she was sitting next to him and did not run away, although she should. The girl turned around in fright, looking around the room to understand why. According to the plant, she had to escape. Kvan was even more worried about the girl, whose actions became more and more strange. In the green eyes of the Empress, chilling horror froze, because the flowers shouted that if she did not leave, he would die. Such an acute plant reaction was associated with the event that occurred in this greenhouse about a week ago. A male voice asked his interlocutor about whether she thought about his offer. The girl said that her answer did not change, and he did not understand why she would be so stubborn. He tried for the sake of all. The interlocutor began to lose her temper more and more. She worked for so long to get her position. The man replied that this was working very well, but was the work more important for her than the younger sister? She clenched her hands into her fists. The girl did not want to risk her work, but her sister was her weak spot. When asked about how he found out about Edith, the man said that this is not important, but it is important to get consent to their deal. He asked the girl to simply report to him everything about what the new empress did and said. The interlocutor worked in the palace. For her, it would not be a problem. Moreover, she came to a meeting to him. This obviously meant that she was interested in the offer of a dark-haired aristocrat. So why was it stubborn? The man believed that they could become closer. But his self-confidence only angered the girl once again. The participant in the conversation was Marianne, the main maid in the palace, which conducted the empress of the excursion. At the end of the working day, the girl always went to the city to see her younger sister. Every day, she returned home to be able to look after Edith. That was the name of her sister. When Marianne reached the destination and entered the house, the youngest lay on the bed. She did not sleep but was tired. The eldest girl apologized for recently she began to return later. There was a lot of work in the palace. She took out a bottle with lilac translucent liquid from his bosom and reminded that her sister should drink the medicine. Edith listened little into her words, as her fever, and it was very difficult to endure her condition. The man asked if he understands correctly that the sister of Marianne suffered from scoliosis. He did not understand that the girl was not disturbed by the fact that her only sister had to suffer from an incurable disease. Everyone knew that this terrible disease spread very quickly throughout the empire. If the sick person did not have the opportunity to regularly take magic medicines, then at one moment he could stain and die. And given all the circumstances, it was difficult to find a sensible wizard in their world who could make medicine. In addition, the prices grew along with demand, which every day only exacerbated the position of the sisters more and more. It was also difficult due to the fact that magic medicines did not give 100% guarantees and could not even help in the end. He said that if Marianne will cooperate with them, he will receive a lot of money and close all his needs. The only thing the girl clung to was that he said, "us." Did someone stand behind him? The brunette replied that he could talk about this only if Marianne accepts his proposal for cooperation. The girl was at all not understanding what to do. She did not want to lose her sister, but she also becomes a traitor too. After that case, with Yusufir and Kvanah in the greenhouse, one day passed. The emperor was called Aslan. He provided the brunette with the assessment of taxes in the western region and the draft of possible reforms of the tax system. At this pace, they managed to prepare a plan until the next meeting of the parliament. The meeting promised to be tense. Conservative aristocrats were ready to do everything to prevent tax reform. If this happened, then Kvanah was ready to disrupt the bureaucratic exam in which he himself insisted. Aslan noticed that they still adhered to old beliefs and believed that aristocrats should rule people. Kvanah agreed and sarcastically noticed that it was they who did not look and allowed the combat slave to climb the throne. I had to keep in mind that they could betray the emperor at any moment because they had to obey. Kvanah was thinking about whether he should have acted with aristocrats as well as the last ruler. The advisor noticed that the emperor could not do that because his soul was full of mercy. The brunette got up from the desktop to stretch and thoughtfully approached the long window. He did not consider himself merciful. He simply did not want to shed human blood once again. Sooner or later, Yusufir had to find out about the past of Kvanah, and he wondered how his wife would react to this. Would she still say that she likes him, and so confidently call him a hero? The emperor sighed tiredly, straightening his hand with neatly laid dark hair. Meanwhile, the US sphere was in the garden in the morning, and did not leave him all this time at all. Marianne came to her, since the maid was given that the empress wanted to talk to her, and therefore called to herself. A fair-haired woman came off from the flowers loved by her, and lifted up, which really wanted to see Mariana. By the impartial tone of the ruler, the maid could not understand what she should have expected from such a serious conversation. But, contrary to her experiences, the empress sincerely smiled at her and said that she would like to ask something. Yusufir in a calm voice invited the maid to walk with her along the greenhouse. It seemed to her that it was simply tiring to stand during the conversation, so they went along the perimeter together. The blonde said that this greenhouse was beautiful, and her breath caught her breath when she first ended up here. And the flowers were amazing for her, because she had never seen such in her homeland before. But also Yusufir was no less surprised at the fact that she was able to talk to the plants of the empire, because her magic was weakened. Kvan then was also very scared, seeing how his wife turned pale from one glance at the flowers. She tried not to show her anxiety, but did not stop thinking about why. If she did not leave, she would die. Plants told her that the personal maid of Yusufir continued to meet in a greenhouse with strange people. They said that these people were going to cause harm to the empress, and flowers would not want this very much. The girl immediately realized that it was about Marianne, but she could not think that the brown-haired woman was able to betray her. With the permission of the flowers, Yusufir looked at their memories to find out what Marianne told those people about. White flowers assured the fair-haired in the fact that they were completely on her side. All fragments of memory overheard with a kaleidoscope flashed before the eyes of the Yusufir, and she found out about everything. The girl suddenly became very serious and decided that she should immediately deal with the situation. The empress thought, looking at the flower bed with flowers and trying to figure out how to approach the maid correctly. When Mariana called her, the girl apologized for suddenly silent, looking at the flowers. She asked whether the maid liked the flowers, and she replied that she considers them beautiful. At least she knew that she had no disgust for them. Mariana picked up one scarlet flower. The maid thoughtfully said that just something so beautiful was easy enough to lose. This was insanely scared of her, because thinking about the fragility of flowers, she remembered her sick sister. The brown-haired woman admitted to the empress that her younger sister loved the flowers much more than herself. Yusufir, pretending that she did not know anything about it, asked her about her sister. Marianne said that Edith is 10 years younger. Their parents died early, so that the responsibility for her upbringing fell on the shoulders of the older sister. The maid admitted that she would like Edith to become a servant and worked with her in the palace, but health did not allow. It was difficult for her to talk about it, but she admitted the Yusufir that her sister had suffered from scoliosis for a long time. Mariana said that she tried to get the medicine in her sister in every way, but suddenly came to her senses. The maid said that it was not important and apologized for starting to talk with the empress about this. But Yusufir reassured her and said that she called to Marianne in order to talk about this first. If you think about it, they saw each other every day. But the fair-haired person did not know anything about her and wanted to fix it. In the future, Marianne was supposed to become a very close person for the empress. Therefore, Yusufir wanted to try to find out the brown-haired woman closer, even if it was already too late. Marianne treated her distant only because in her eyes she was a stranger who suddenly became her mistress. Although she was cold with the empress, if she immediately tried to get closer to the maid, this would not have happened. She still did not get rid of the habit of moving away from people instead of trying to recognize them. But she had to improve, because now she is the empress, and she was responsible for millions of people. The empress promised that she would help Marianne find medicines, but she did not understand why it was the Yusufir. The girl did not understand what the maid was talking about. She was her man, which means she was important to her. From now on, Yusufir was no longer going to run away. She had to correct the mistakes that she made in a past life. The words of the empress struck the maid to the core, and she was very moved by this reaction. Yusufir was going to do everything in her power to help Marianne in her situation. When, after a while, she came to tell about her decision, Kvanah, he was incredibly surprised by her appearance. She said that the last time the emperor went a long way to find her, and now was her turn. Since Kvan at that moment was in the office with Aslan, The girl tactfully asked if they would hurt them. The advisor already wanted to explain to her that they had business, but Kvanah abruptly interrupted him, saying that he was not busy. The man said that they had finished with Aslan, although it was not so, which the Empress was very happy. The blonde asked if His Majesty wanted to share a meal with her and stir up. He was very happy and excited by the unexpected suggestion of the Empress. He really wanted to. They went to the dining room. Yusufir admitted that she was ready, that Kvanah would refuse an unexpected offer. He said that it was not worth worrying, because he was only glad, and she successfully picked up time for a meal. He was also endlessly glad that Yusufir personally invited him to join her and draw up a company. The girl hesitated something uncertainly about the boss of the cook, herself not understanding why she blushed so suddenly. Today, the cook, it seems, had to try even more, since this evening the imperial couple ate together. Kvanah, with surprise, asked the cook had to work even more. Was the table set not as usual? She suddenly came to her senses and did not answer him anything, strongly worried. The girl almost blabbed her husband that she ate these days in the library and almost did not leave there. Kvanah was worried about whether the Empress was sure that everything was fine with her, but did not wait for an answer. He said that they were lucky to meet, but so he would not know that something happened to her if she did not tell. Yusufir thought and did not understand how she could, without preparation, to dump information about Skiliosa and the secret of the forest on Kvanah. Kvanah unexpectedly said that from now on they would have a meal together, despite employment. He cut off her piece of cheesecake, which was for dessert, and offered to try, as she liked raspberries. The girls took a plate with a piece of the cake from him, and the emperor again asked her if nothing happened. He noticed that she talked about how much he was busy, but nevertheless, for some reason, asked to devote time to her. The man understood that she wanted to tell him something important. Yusufir admitted that her maid told her something. The story took some time, and the girl completely plunged her husband to the essence of the maid's problems. Kvanah said that he was familiar with Mariana, and she for a long time passed an internship in the educational institution for the servant. Thanks to her outstanding skills and good manners, Marianne received the main janitor in his palace. But the girl regularly left the castle. He knew that there was a reason for that, but did not think that everything was so serious. Kvanah suggested that because of this whole situation with Squelius, the girl could not concentrate on work at all. Yusufir asked if they could transport Marianne's sister to her. For everyone, this decision would benefit. Kvanah suggested that Edith instead in the Imperial Hospital. Simon just planned to study Squelius. The best doctors of the Empire were going to engage in detection, and Marianne would not have to worry. The girl was just delighted with this proposal, so much so that Yusufir could not even believe it. Kvanah grinned and said that he was only an empress to wish for something, and the Empire would do everything to please her. Yusufir was incredibly surprised by such words of the emperor and did not believe her happiness. The girl was so confused that Kvanah was even worried about whether everything was in order and whether he said something wrong. The empress only thanked him and said that she was afraid to imagine what would happen to Mariana, if not for him. Kvanah modestly replied that he only followed the advice of a fair-haired one. He carefully touched the back of her palm with his finger, gently running him on pale skin. The emperor smilingly remarked that because everything turned out so well, she should thank herself only. She shyly replied that his consent and support helped, so she thought that they were both worthy of gratitude. He affectionately smiled at his wife and still agreed that the girl was completely right. She removed her hand and began to cheerfully chew the cheesecake, trying to cope with her awkwardness approaching her. She tried to keep herself in her hands, but still thought that it was necessary to eat and leave as soon as possible. Suddenly, Kvanah interrupted her and said that she had something left on her face while she was eating. The girl tried to remove it. Since the spouse did not quite understand where she was getting dirty, the man moved closer to her to help a little. He carefully wiped a piece of the cake from the corner of her lips, indicating what he just talked about. The guy removed the baby from his face and wiped his hand on a napkin. Yusufir did not understand her husband incomprehensibly, not having time to understand what had just happened, because he approached so quickly. The man's actions greatly embarrassed her, and she uncertainly thanked that for help, unable to take her eyes off him. Kvanah was standing next to his wife's chair, mating a little to her, and also continued to look at her deep emerald eyes. He, in such a short time, became almost his own. On the back of the girl, goosebumps ran. The man called her by name and uncertainly began, wanting her something, but did not have time to finish the phrase. They were interrupted. Aslan unexpectedly burst into the room, who was just looking for His Majesty for an important business. A guy with green hair said that they urgently need to check one document together. Noticing the slight irritation of the ruler and the embarrassment of the Empress's face, Aslan was worried if he had come to them. Kvanah, pulling himself together, said that this is not so important and asked what was there at the expense of that important document. Yusuf's thoughts were busy with the fact that if it did not seem to her, the husband just wanted to kiss her when he leaned. The emperor restrained himself with the chosen one and said that he was very glad to see her at dinner. The girl also answered him goodbye, agreeing that soon they would see herself again. Aslan and Evan retired, and Yusuf tried for herself to understand how she should react to signs of attention from Kvanah. Recently, next to her husband, she had strange, not familiar to her earlier feelings. After some time, Yusuf, as always recently, sat in the secret section of the library. Marianne came to her. The Empress was glad to tell the maid wonderful news that her sister would soon be accepted in the imperial hospital. She had already talked about this with the emperor. Soon for her sisters had to prepare a place and bring to the palace. The maid noted that only the sons and members of the ruling dynasty had the right to be patients with the imperial hospital. Mariana thought that she and her sister were not worthy of such an honor, since they were ordinary commoners. She was only lucky to get this work by the mercy of the emperor, but no more. She did not deserve such an attitude. If they were in another country, she would not dare to raise her eyes even on the hem of the empress's dress. Yusuf assured the girl that in the Empire of Rodon, people were judged by their skills, and not by order, so she could be calm. She knew that all this time, the brown-haired woman coped with her work better than anyone else. So I deserve everything. Could the Yusuf become a good empress if she does not take care of those who are dear to her and adheres to principles? She did not want to neglect her main maid, so she hoped that the girl would accept her help. Marianne, either bashfully or embarrassedly, drilled the floor of the library with her golden eyes. She could not restrain her tears, as the thought that she was a traitor was hit in her head. She fell to her knees and repented, due to the fact that she lied to such a wonderful person for a long time. The maid admitted that one person secretly contacted her. For the first time, before the arrival of the Empress in the palace, he said that he could get the medicine and provide her and sister if she informed him about the Empress. Marianne admitted that she deserved a cruel punishment, but the Empress understood why the maid did so. The Yusuf, on the contrary, admired the fact that Mariana did not agree to the deal immediately, but only became a victim of manipulation. The girl asked the brown-haired woman to calm down and asked if she could say who made her such an offer. Marianne admitted that the person who contacted her was a famous civil servant in the empire. This mysterious aristocrat was called Baron Edwin, and he clearly had not the best intentions. The Empress said that she first hears this name, so she tried to understand why Baron needed information about her. The maid was not sure, but warned that Baron Edwin was a very slippery and cunning man. Once he showed a strong disrespect for the former emperor, and since then lived underground, fearing retribution. It turned out that the Baron did not agree with the idea of the new emperor. He joined him for his own security. Therefore, Baron Baynar, who made the greatest contribution to the promotion of the revolution, refused to assign him any title, and other aristocrats participating in the revolution, including Baron Edwin, did not rely on the other aristocrats. Kvanah granted him an estate as a reward, but soon, due to Edmund's fault, everything fell into decay. Now he is an official of a low rank. The revolution was in order to eliminate the sense of binding of the ruling class, so the aristocrats were indignant. Nevertheless, Yusuf did not understand why Edwin to follow her. She did not have power in the political arena. Mariana asked her to be careful and said that the Baron talked about the fact that more than one person was involved in this. Yusuf asked the maid where the estate was located, which Edwin received as a reward, and she indicated the approximate position. It was somewhere near the territory of the other people, and above on the map was the region controlled by Ahai. This fact was surprised by the Empress, and some anxious fears against this background are accumulated into her head. She was very bothered by the fact that the Baron, who turned out to be a traitor, lived next to Akaya. Her older brother could be involved in this. Remembering the pendant for communication with her brother and cunning plans, she suspected that he could cooperate with Edwin. She scolded herself for not immediately understanding the connection. Only one person wanted to control her every step. Brother still did not trust her and followed other people even now when she left Aheya. The maid was puzzled by how quickly the mood of the Empress was deteriorated. She was very darkened and thought. Recaller, the Oosphere fumigated the maid for the information, trying to calm the trembling in her own body. Mariana said that if a girl gives her permission, she would like to contact the Baron again. Oosphere did not quite understand what the brown-haired woman was cloning. The girl tried to explain her decision to her. The brown-haired woman said that if they accuse him, then real traitors will hide, and they will not be able to find out who stood behind this. The Oosphere was dangerous to speak out against the ill-wishers itself. It should be acted more carefully. That is why Marianne wanted to play the role of a double agent, pretending to accept Baron Edwin's proposal. The maid wanted to gain his trust and learn more about the conspiracy that was preparing against the Empress. The blonde was Opes, pulled by the fact that if she agrees, her subordinate could suffer at the hands of the Baron and his allies. The brown-haired woman convinced her that since Oosphere saved her sister, it would be an honor for her to devote her life to serving her. Therefore, Marianne knelt down and, taking the Empress's palms into her own hands, desperately asked to allow her to help. She wanted the Empress to give her a chance and, although not completely confidently, agreed to this proposal. The blonde thanked the maid for devotion and courage that she showed. The day passed quite calmly, and, when the dark time came, the young Empress went down into the castle's courtyard. She stopped in front of the entrance to the very new-built building around which Kvan planted flowers for her. The girl squatted down in front of the flower beds and carefully examined the plants, pondering everything that happened in a day. From behind her, he called Kvan, who also went down to the courtyard, secretly following his wife. He asked the Chosen One what she thought so concentratedly about, and the Oosphere said that wherever she went, beautiful flowers everywhere. She pointed her finger at a certain flower, saying that this species is difficult to force to bloom. The gardener tried perfectly. Now, when the Empress mentioned this, already Kvan thought about what it was so. The girl translated the topic and said that she had already ordered Marianne to bring her sister to the palace. She also said that the maid was very happy, that now they would care about the baby. Mariana squeezed her hand so tightly that Oosphere felt how the maid perked up and gained a new meaning in life. But for some reason, at that moment, the Empress became, and very scary. The alarm originated in her chest. Then she suddenly realized that Marianne became completely her man and felt a huge responsibility for the girl. When Marianne cried, holding her hands, the Empress thought about whether she deserved such confidence from the maid. Oosphere suddenly fell silent and apologized to Kvanah because she had so many thoughts. It was not worth loading it. The Emperor, contrary to the fears of the Oosphere, was obviously not at all against listening to all her thoughts. He said that every day he walked along this road to the office, but he had never noticed what beautiful flowers here. Kvanah suggested that if it were not for her attentiveness, then he would never have found out how it was not easy for their gardener. In the case of Marianne, everything is exactly the same. He was somewhat alerted to her, but he did not even think to find out what was happening. He noticed that noticing such things and taking care of others was not at all easy, so he praised his wife. The Emperor was glad that every day his wife was remarkable and how sensitive, good man. He believed that Oosphere was able to bear responsibility for their people and completely trusted her in this matter. Kvanah carefully smiled at her and thanked that he had it and agreed to marry him. The girl's heart trembled from such words, because she was no less happy for the fact that she ended up in the Empire of Rayon. Kvanah took her hand, and with all his love and respect the brush of the Chosen One, putting all his feelings into this gesture. Each time the Emperor told Oosphere something so pleasant, she remembered what secret she hid from him. The blonde really liked this man very much, so she was afraid to disappoint her husband in the future. She could not imagine how in the future Kvanah would react to the secret of the keepers, and her brother, and her brother. She knew that she could never become a real empress, but so far she was silent about it. Nevertheless, even if this is not real, She wanted to try to benefit the Radon Empire while she was here. In order to have the right to take responsibility for others, she had to work as hard as possible. And at the same time, she had to maintain a subtle balance between Ahi's devotion, agreement with her brother, and Radon. Not so long ago, the brother tried to contact her by the magical amulet, which he handed over to her before leaving. He desperately called her through the artifact, trying to draw attention to himself, but could not know that Yusfir had heard him perfectly. A little later, she found the strength to answer, and told her brother that she was very glad to hear him, although this is not so. He said that there was no news from her, so he was worried, thinking that she had died. But this was not so. The king understood that. The sister was still trying to please Kvanah. She apologized that she made her brother worry. He asked how Yusfir felt in the empire, and she said that everything was not as bad as she thought before. To herself, the empress thought that, although Marianne became her double agent, not only she should get information, Yusfir told her brother that the emperor was very suspicious. She could not move freely. She lied to please. The king of Ahe had other information and said that, as far as he knows, they cared about her well. Pretending that this is not so, Yusfir told her brother that she did not understand what he was talking about. The guy replied that he had taken care of everything, introducing a loyal person into the upper layers of society in order to look after her. Yusfir already knew about this, but did not tell him. As expected, her brother most likely stood behind Baron Edwin. She tried to find out from the king who this person is, because in this case, it would be easier for her to act. The guy refused to speak. He wanted his sister to not ask unnecessary questions and simply act on his instructions. If the girl began to intervene in politics for no good reason, then this would only cause them problems, as he thought. Although if Yusfir really wanted to help him in the implementation of his plan, then she had one opportunity to do it. The king said that in the empire, everyone talked about the recent project of the tax system reform. Despite the fact that the reform plan was quite radical, Kvanah did not encounter condemnation and discontent. Even the conservative aristocracy did not show a negative attitude to the innovations of the emperor. The brother wanted the Yusfir to know from the spouse how he managed to achieve this and avoid possible scandals. Since they were going to destroy the empire, there was no need to contribute discord between the emperor and the conservatives. The Yusfir set an alarm that the aristocrats also contributed to the revolution, and if they intervened, Ahea could suffer. The king of Ahe mysteriously and ambiguously said that his sister was in a hurry with her conclusions. He said irritably that since the Yusfir to worry about his native kingdom, then she should look for the weaknesses of Kvanah. If she hadn't done this, then I would have to make the girl whisper the emperor he needed in bed. He restrainedly ended his speech with the words that he hopes that her heart still hurt for the fate of their country. Then, making his voice softer and pulling himself together, the blonde asked his sister to contact him more often and report everything. But cutting off the connection with the Yusfir, the guy became furious. He was infuriated that the girl pretended to know something. Clutching an amulet in his hand, he recalled the blonde's words that she was worried about Ahea and how cute she turned to him. He was convinced that all this deliberate concern and obedience of Yusfir, complete nonsense and nonsense. In his opinion, she simply did not want to lose universal love and could only regret herself, pretending to be a heroine. It was in order to remain a savior in the eyes of her people, she agreed to this humiliating marriage. He desperately shouted into the void that if Yusfir was worried about his kingdom, he was obliged to fight to the end. The guy was obsessed with a terrible thought, believing that everyone was only thinking about how to destroy Ahea as soon as possible. Yusfir did not know anything at all about what her brother went to protect her native country from enemies. When he began to rule instead of their stupid father, who fell ill after his wife's death and spit on Ahea, the guy was only 14. None of the subjects was sincerely devoted to him, the young crown prince, behind which a sick father was hiding. And besides the difficulties that he encountered when he became the ruler of Ahe, he had to take care of the younger ones. The same Yusfir cried and told him that she missed her mother and worried about the powerless father. The guy made his choice. Even if he had to devote his whole life to this, he would save his country and family. He went through blood and betrayal, through pain and distrust from the people. No one thought about how difficult it was for him. At heart, Prince Dickwit was lurking envy of his sister. because in the end she became the keeper, and not he. Despite how much strength and soul was invested in his country, the princess wanted to choose a ruler. Due to the fact that she became a guardian, everyone believed that it was the Usfir who should rule the country and replace his brother. When Dequit found out about this, his fear and disappointment had no bounds. He tried so hard to be a good ruler. He could not allow him to be deprived of the right to the throne and select the power that he deserved. The sister tried to learn to manage her magic when she woke up in her and hoped that her brother would help her. He said that he understands how hard the Usfir was. He tried to support, but could not relate to her as before. For himself, Daiquit has long decided that he would stay close to her sister only until she betrayed him. As a result, the fact that his sister turned out to be the guardian did not affect the development of their kingdom, contrary to expectations. All its achievements and magic went to isolate their country from the outside world, allegedly protecting it. The people thought that it was good for them. The country is safe. But they did not understand how terrible the fact that they were divorced from the world. Stupid people did not see the true problem. Therefore, they put the Usfir by the true heiress of the throne, which worried Dequit. But he found an ally who assured that he would soon see the whole world, how he would decapitate the terrible Kvanah with his own hands. Surrounded by the support of a mysterious associate, Dequit could soon gain power over the whole continent. The guy looked at his watch that symbolized the speed of time, and the king agreed that there was little left. In order for Ahea to flourish, it was necessary to make sacrifices, even those that might seem monstrous at first glance. Let the Daiquit and not the guardian. But he was still about to prove that he was worthy of greater respect. He intended to surpass the sister and former rulers of Akaya, becoming not only the king of the country, but also the whole continent. Meanwhile, the Usfir discussed with Mariana in Radon the idea of meeting people from parliament. The empress believed that she needed to know about how and because of whom such a power of the empire arose. The parliament included 10 aristocrats and as many commoners. To adopt the law, an agreement was necessary for 13 people. Usfir thought that due to an equal number of aristocrats and commoners, the struggle for nomination of the law would be fierce. The members of the parliament definitely should have been those who were better than the rest in the current political situation. Daiquit already knew about the tax reform put forward from his informants, but she did not think that Edwin told him. Since the baron was an official of a low rank, he did not know about reform, which had not yet entered into force. She was sure that one of the senior aristocrats also served her brother and reported the news. Usfir said that she would like to meet some people from the parliament, but not to look too politicized. Marianne said that the ladies from the families of those aristocrats that are part of the parliament often talked at tea drinks. The maid suggested inviting those ladies and arranging something like that, so that everyone took it for a social event. And at the same time, the empress herself could safely find out the desired information about her husbands. Usfir thanked the maid and said that this would be a depth. She was going to do so. Marianne said that everything would be ready in a few days and asked where all this would happen. Usfir did not have many ideas, but since it was a tea party, but a place was beautiful and luxurious, therefore, they decided to hold an event in the greenhouse, and after a few days, the ladies arrived at the invitation to the palace. Marianne greeted the girls, and they whispered quietly about the fact that they had never seen such a beautiful garden. They gossiped, saying that it was a political marriage, and their empress is a simple princess from a small country. They were surprised that Kvanah has made a lot of efforts to this garden to please the Usfir, which was not even dear to him. Their discussion was interrupted by the unexpected appearance of the empress in the garden. She was wearing a luxurious green dress. She smiled. The empress said that although they had not seen each other before, she was glad to welcome the lady in her greenhouse. Representatives of the most noble families gathered at the table and talked sweetly, discussing the beauty surrounding them. Usfir supported the conversation, but simultaneously studied the girls and revealed among them one leader with greater power. It was the Duchess of Evelyn Hiley. She said that thanks to the emperor, they could be calm for the fate of the country. The family of red-haired Hiley is a great family whose daughter became queens for several generations. As the Usfir is known, the Hiley, Fernand dynasty, were the first conservative aristocrats supporting Kvanah. Usfir was sure that all the gathered ladies were experienced politicians who survived a wave of riots and did not lose influence. What empress they will see her will have a great influence on her political activity. While everyone was calmly communicated on social topics, there was one girl who was a little bothered by the empress. As Mariana said, this girl was a sister of Oslina and the wife of the Marquis Brooks, Marquise Rinvera Brooks. It is not surprising that Yusfer seemed to see that she had seen herself from the past. She turned to the Rinver, interrupting the rest. The empress said that she knew that the girl had a love of tea and asked her tea in the palace. Such an unexpected personal appeal put Rinver in an awkward position, and she was confused, worried. The marquise began to comment on the taste and type of tea leaves and said that her family was also engaged in its cultivation. Other girls at the table said that Rinver was so taciturn that sometimes she showed her clumsy side. The marquise was noticeably embarrassed because of this, and as if at the moment regretted that she generally decided to answer something to the empress. The ladies at the table began to completely discuss Rinver itself, her family and house, because of which she became more uncomfortable. Their conversation came to the conclusion that someone remembered that Yusfer itself was from the cold, cruel regions, like Rinver. Haile said that in the northern part it was so cold that the crop did not grow properly, and such as the Brooks clan was difficult. The Duchess asked the Empress what her homeland was, and whether she was very different from the northern part of their empire. Yusfer accurately determined that they were trying to grab her for the living and proceeding with provocative issues. They deliberately tormented Rinver, a lady from the unrestrained dynasty, to check on whose side it was. It was impossible to touch the possibility that one of these girls could well cooperate with her brother. She perfectly understood what she should do to implement her future plans, but could not do so wrong. She worried that she had to join the Duchess and be strict and cruel, but did not want it. But before the anxiety flooded the Yusfer with her head, she remembered the Kvanah and seemed to feel his touch. The girl remembered how gently he kissed her hand and how sincerely trusted her with both his feelings and his people. Then she decided that she had to try to become a good empress and not allow the Dikit to clog her. The empress told the girl that they were right. In the north, cold and severe weather reigned all year round. The Duchess replied that if you think about it, both people lived in the north and south. Was there a difference between them? The blonde pulled a smile on her mouth and said that she was glad that the secular ladies of the empire were interested in the north. She was pleased that the ladies paid so much attention to how things were in other families. After all, it should have meant that the girls properly ruled their lands. The Duchess, a little warily and incomprehensibly, said that she did not quite understand what the Empress was talking about. Yusfer calmly replied that she knew that her family had a particularly harsh winter and wanted to know how Evelyn had things to do. One of the girls said that in the south of the empire, unlike its north, the weather during this season was favorable. She added that it happened because the goddess blessed their lands, and they were grateful to her for that. As far as the Yusfer was known, last fall there were few rains, and throughout the empire there was a lack of food. She saw the record, in which it is said that the imperial palace sent his people grain in difficult times. Regardless of the blessing of the goddess, winter still remained a difficult period for their people. The empress said that severe cold came just from the south and not from the north. Therefore, they all had to look after even the most gloomy and remote lands, because their people lived there. After these words, Yusfer returned to the question that she asked initially. She asked the Duchess Evelyn how winter passed. Understanding that the Duchess could not answer, Yusfer said that she did not think that the question would be so difficult for that. But when the Empress asked if the Marquis could tell about how winter on her lands passed, she answered yes. True, Rinver was ashamed to admit that in winter their lands became literally useless due to location, but therefore they put off the grain that the Emperor sent to them, so as not to starve at the time of severe and persistent frosts. Farmers harvested firewood for the palace, for which they received daily salary and retained their dignity. Yusfer, after hearing, said that even though the Brooks estate was in the north, during the winter she would prefer to stay with them. The Empress praised the girl for doing everything for people, and the Duchess was outraged that they put Rinver above. She asked what answer to the Yusfer wants from them, but she stated that she just asked the girls about their last winter. Thoughtfully circling a fingers of the cup of tea, the Yusfer also said that she had checked the annual budget before coming. Last winter, the Haile family and prepared a large amount of precious ore and took it all into their estates. The empress noticed that the Brooks family purchased only food and clothes, but what other ladies did with iron ore. Yusfir wanted to know where the countess and the duchess used ore in their territories, and Evelyn outraged these hints. The duchess irritably asked whether the empress was thinking that they could prepare in winter for the uprising. The countess was ready to be alarmed by such suspicions, no less than the duchess. Fear was read in her gras. The girl jumped up from her place and told the empress that this is all just some kind of misunderstanding. It was just that the girls heard that the ownership of the Misril mine, owned by the imperial family, would be sold. The countess said that they needed iron ore only in order to develop this mine. Yusfir became clear that they agreed to approve the tax reform only if Kvanah was the right to the mine. On this, they could earn a lot of money, so the conservative aristocracy behaved quietly at the meeting of the parliament. The duchess said that the U.S. sphere could consider it insufficient, but they both invested in the empire and its development. She devoted her whole life to this country, but could not hide anxiety because in response she received only neglect. This conversation brought her to strong emotions, so she asked the empress permission to leave today. The tea party continued for a short time, and after everything went. Since then, a week has passed. In the empire, there was an early evening, and the U.S. sphere sat, tired, in its usual place in its office. None of the aristocrats never wrote to her, probably therefore she was so bad. Perhaps it was worth it to please them. Aslan knocked on her room and asked for permission to enter inside. She greeted Baron Bernard and asked him if something bad happened, since he came to her. He came closer, handed the empress an envelope and a small bag, saying that this sister asked him to bring it. He heard that Yusfir showed a special concern for the Rinver and defended her, for which he was infinitely grateful. Baron Plant that when she was 10, her sister fell down with a fever and began to stutter from that time. Because of this, she hid for a long time from the world, but for the first time asked him to deliver a letter. Yusfir carefully opened the bag. It contained tea leaves that grew only on the territory of the Marquis of Brooks, which Rinver was talking about. They were special. Outside, very small, but at the same time persistent, and had an incredibly strong and pleasant aroma. He said that this tea was very valuable, and even his sister did not send him often. Apparently, she was very grateful. Aslan said that, perhaps, Rinver was wiser than him and better understood who should really serve. The Baron expressed his immense gratitude for the mercy that the Empress provided him and his sister. He enthusiastically said that her favor would never forget when the Usfir suddenly interrupted him. The memories of the words of Kvanah surfaced in my head that she deserved to be responsible for their people. Usfir thought that everything turned out exactly as the Emperor told her then. Even if she could not use magic, she remained a simple person who was able to help others. She held in her hand a handful of tea leaves from the Rinvera, carefully looking at them, as if holding a real treasure. The Empress told Baron Bernard that he was right, and the Marquise really gave her very good tea. The next day, Kvanah and Yusfir sat together in the garden and drank tea, which the Empress gave the Marquise of Rinver. A fair-haired man told her husband that she could make friends with the Marquise Brooks, and Aslan became very kind to her. Kvanah was surprised that earlier his wife called him Baron Bernard, and now suddenly called him by name. Yusfir shared that after the situation with the tea party, the Baron himself invited her to turn to him as Aslan. The girl was amused that it seemed to her that Aslan hates her, but it turned out that there was nothing to be afraid of. The Emperor drew attention to the exalted mood of Yusfir. She was happy that she became closer to his people. The Emperor muttered shyly that it was fine, but he felt as if they had forgotten about him. The girl did not quite understand what imperiously bothered him, but he did not answer her clarifying question. The man, translating the topic, asked Yusfir whether there could be a moment better than what they had now. At first, she did not understand what it was about, but when he said that he was recalling the arrival of the young lady, everything reached the Yusfir. It was on that day that the younger sister of Marianne, a girl named Edith, finally arrived in the palace. The carriage drove up to the entrance to the Imperial Hospital just at the appointed time, and a low, brown-haired woman looked out of there. Her older sister and Empress met her. Edith bowed and said that it was a great honor for her to meet Usfir. Marianne could not stop smiling and rejoice at the fact that she would finally provide good help to her younger sister. And at the same time, Edith was incredibly happy that she was finally closer to her sister and they could see more often. The younger sister joyfully rushed into the embrace of the eldest, tightly wrapping her hands on her waist. The maid hugged her back. The maid said that she was glad to see that her sister was better. It was all thanks to Her Majesty and their medicines. The Eusphere was glad that from now on, the girl could receive a full treatment and hoped that Edith would get better soon. She held out Edith's hand and said that she was pleased to meet her. She asked them to take care of each other. The Empress felt a strong feeling of compassion, to this child who had already managed to suffer for her life. Edith shook the Empress's hand a little uncertainly, not quite understanding how to behave in new conditions for her. Suddenly, the Eusphere felt some strange, frightening vibrations of magic. She did not understand what it was. Before she had time to think about it, as she interrupted and called for Simon, who came to them. He asked how long they waited for him. The fair-haired reassured him and said that they came recently. After the handshake, her head was spinning. Having decided that she would think about it later, the girl introduced the young doctor Edith, since they were not yet familiar. Simon looked in surprise at the young girl, which the Empress pointed to him and froze, examining her. Edith and Simon a little awkwardly exchanged greetings and fluently met each other, as Eusphere wanted. The healer suggested following him so that he could show everything Edith and explain. Simon and Edith were the same. Having carried them inside, Simon explained that in fact, it was a hospital for aristocrats, so there are not many chambers here. Also, the red-haired man showed them how much they increased the number of laboratories on the study of diseases. Now they were studying scoliosis and ways to get rid of it. Simon's desktop was littered with reports. He said that due to the fact that the work is going on, he had a little dirty on his table and asked for forgiveness for it. Eusphere said that there was nothing wrong with this. On the contrary, it is nice to see that their doctors worked hard. She picked up one of the sheets from the table of Simon and asked if she realized correctly that this is information about the disease. The doctor said that, alas, they could not reduce the price of the medicine, since it was produced only at the top of Jilly. He studied the composition because he hoped that they could make a prototype in the imperial palace, but did not work out. The ingredients from the medicine were completely different from the usual ones. Perhaps it was the influence of magic. He said that since he does not know the essence, he could not expeme, and they will have to find some other way. Eusphere hastened to tell Simon that if it was only in magic, then she could help and work with him. Simon did not expect such a proposal from the Empress at all, so her confidence shocked the guy. He asked if Eusphere wanted to join the study of the medicine for scoliosis, to which she answered in the affirmative. When she only came to the Empire, her magic weakened, but now she wanted to establish herself in her role. She really wanted to be useful to people and help the Empire with what was good enough. Simon was not against cooperation, and therefore in the evening, Eusphere told Klanahu about her desire to help the doctor. The girl thought that the husband would be delighted with this idea, but it was impossible to say that he was glad about his face. The man was tiredly buried with his fingers in his hair and sighed. His response to this proposal was not affirm. He said that whatever the reason was, he could not give the Eusphere for this approval. The girl tried to understand why her husband gave her such a clear negative answer and asked him about it. She stood on her own and said that if he and Simon work together, they will be able to learn more about the disease. Kvanah said that since the girl heard about the cure for scoliosis, she clearly had to hear about Jilly Mountain. On the whole continent, it was impossible to find a place with the same power as this peak, and the cure for scoliosis at that time was the most popular product there, and interfering in this whole matter was dangerous. The girl also understood this, but they could not just close her eyes to how many people died on the streets of the city. Kvanah assured her that the administration was well aware of the seriousness of the situation and was looking for a way out. Eusphere should not worry, but his words did not calm the Empress at all. She could not sit back while the rest worked so hard. She recalled that Kvanah said that it would only be glad if a case appeared that could light a fire in it. He said that he considered her a worthy person, capable of taking responsibility for the empire, so why was now against? Kvanah said that these were different things, and he wanted his wife to live calmly and not fit into such hardships she did not understand. Did he really want her to drink teas with court ladies, pretending that she knew nothing? Patience of the Eusphere came to an end, and she shouted at the brunette, saying that she was not a puppet and he was not a puppeteer. She was very upset that Gvan did not want to trust her with any responsible things, locking in a golden cage. Only a few moments later came to her that she probably went too far, and now her husband could be angry with her. And all this was because of her. She intervened in politics, screamed, although not that she had the right to do so. She completely forgot about prudence, and at some point felt permissible, acting incorrectly. Probably, she was just a slisk got used to the fact that Kvan was always too kind to her, and a lot of things that allowed her. Eusphere hastened to outraged and explained that what she said was not quite what she had in mind. But Quanch carefully interrupted her and apologized first. He did not want to scare her with his behavior and words. He came closer to her and, taking the girl by the shoulders, calmly said that it was all his fault. He apologized and said that he knew how important it was for her. He was not angry, but as if he was just afraid for her. The girl immediately hugged her wife and, clutching him to her heart, carefully asked him what disturbed him. Kovan admitted that he was very afraid that he would not be able to protect his empress. Therefore, he was so afraid to even think about it, so that again, at least for a moment, to release an important person from sight for him. These thoughts did not come out of his head. Exhaled and pulling himself together, Kvan knelt before the Eusphere. The brunette depressed his head, and asked the girl to understand his experiences. Taking the girl's hand in his palms, he asked Eusphere permission to allow him to protect her at all costs. She pondered the man's words that he could not allow him to let go of sight of an important person again. She ran her hand on his cheek and carefully asked if she realized correctly that something happened in his past. Eusphere wanted to know if he was already passing through the loss of a loved one. Kvan suddenly jumped and closed his face. He apologized fluently, unable to answer his wife to the question asked to her, and rushed towards the exit. Apparently, this question touched the old wound, which Kvan was trying not to talk about, so he decided to escape instead of an answer. The Empress wanted to stop him and find out what was the matter, but by the guy's reaction, she decided that it was better to be alone. The night passed restless, but fast enough. The sun's rays playfully made their way into the room through the window. Eusphere reluctantly woke up and drew attention to the fact that Kvanah was still gone. He did not return at night, but where did he go? She could not stop thinking about the words of the emperor and that he had once lost a person dear to him. Then Mariana came to the room with a wonderful bouquet of lilac flowers. She noticed that the empress woke up early. The maid was just about to change the flowers in a vase. Eusphere thanked her, but said that she was a little depressed. The maid decided to quickly cope with her work and leave the empress to rest, but she suddenly asked her a question. Eusphere asked Mariana herself collects bouquets in the morning, but she said that the emperor personally was engaged in this. Every morning, he brought the maid new flowers, because he wanted to show the Eusphere their special beauty. Memories of all bouquets flashed through my head, which used to be in the empress's room. Scarlet roses, small flowers that the Eusphere loved so much. Kvan tried to select different flowers of different colors. Suddenly, even for herself, the empress was sympathetic. She, like no one else, knew that Kvan is not a bad person. After some time, the fair-haired, habitually, went down to one of her favorite places in the palace, to the greenhouse. She spent all day in the room due to poor Yuding. The maid suggested walking around the garden until it got dark. Eusphere gloomily thought that even Marianne was even concerned about her mood. She felt guilty. The girl sighed heavily. All day, she unsuccessfully tried to fight her experiences. Suddenly, she heard some strange rustle coming from the bushes, not far from herself. The girl looked behind the bushes, strewn with red small colors. An unknown man was sleeping on the garden path. She did not expect at all that someone else could be in the greenhouse, besides her, now. Especially not familiar to her. Judging by the form, the gray-haired man was a soldier. But what did he do in her greenhouse on the floor? The Empress thought that he was not the best idea to wake up, so it was worth calling someone else. But she did not have time to do this. The soldier suddenly woke up, rose sharply, and measured it with a piercing look. This happened so suddenly that Eusphere did not even understand how she was supposed to react to a sudden guest. and he, frightened, is not clear what, bounced off the girl to the side and began to come to the rescue desperately. Fortunately, the fright of an unknown soldier did not last long, and he quickly realized that in front of him was a new ruler of the Empire of the Sun. He guiltily scratched his head and apologized for his reaction. He came here to rest and did not expect to meet someone. Yusufir asked him where he was and what his name was. The guy replied that he did not belong to any place. But nevertheless, he said that the name of the contemptuous young man, standing in front of the Empress, was a jacket. She in a whisper repeated his name, as if trying to remember and feel how suitable for the guy opposite. But while she spoke his name, she suddenly remembered that she had already heard this name before and knew about Jaxor. The fact that the girl was familiar with some information about him did not weakly surprise the young man. If you think about it, Aslan was the left hand of Kvanah, but the Jack power was the right. He was a close friend of the emperor and soldier. Jaxor was famous for its outstanding combat abilities, resourcefulness, and courage. Thanks to this, he became the commander of the Central Imperial Army. But why now he did not belong to any place? The Empress could not understand this, because the Jacker stood at the head of the whole army. The guy was flattered by the fact that she knew him well. Jaxor said that Yusufir was right, only now he was no longer a commander, not a soldier. The young man, without much regret, and even vice versa, joyfully said that he had recently resigned. Enough of his wars. Now he could enjoy freedom, not afraid that his beauty would rot on the battlefield. It sounded quite self-readily. Moreover, His Majesty was very demanding. At such a pace, the jacket would not have time to live for himself. The Empress objected embarrassedly. Of course, she did not know what he was at work, but in the life of the Quan was very cute. Jacker surprised that the Empress spoke so about his friend. Kvanah, whom he knew, was very distant. The former soldier enthusiastically said that the Yusufir could not be shy and tell him everything. She asked what was talking about. The guy, apologizing in advance, asked if their marriage with Kvanah was humiliation for her native Akaya. In addition, His Majesty was not the most friendly person, but rather even a little cruel. Jaxor knew that the Yusufir could be hard. Therefore, she wanted her to know that she could always turn to him. That's just the Yusufir was outraged by the words of the ex-commander, and she asked irritably as soon as he could talk about Croania. Jaxor grinned. He thoughtfully said that, apparently, the Empress considered him a longtime friend, a good person. The guy just in case asked if she was threatened. Suddenly, Kvanah did something, but there is no one to tell her. Yusufir said that it was the arrogance of saying such a thing about her husband right in her face. He did not even dare to assume this. The gray-haired one was laughing at the fact that the girl used the word suppose. He knew Kvanah almost better than anyone. They were familiar from childhood, and who, if not he, knew all the features of the behavior and character of the emperor. The Landrine was not going to give up positions, and said in displeasure what the Jacker was mistaken for his account all this time. Yusufir convinced the emperor's friend that Kvanah is an ideal husband. He is bluff, cute, and attentive, and not only. She appreciated and respected him very much. Jaxor laughed kindly and said that he was glad to hear that she was happy with their marriage. Yusufir wanted to ask why the guy suddenly stopped arguing, but he knocked her, greeting her with Kvanah. The girl was taken aback, hearing this, and was worried, realizing that right now her husband was standing behind her, the object of their dispute. She turned around in alarm. In front of her, Kvanah really stood, who seemed to recently come to the garden. The guy's cheeks were treacherously blushed, and he could not find words to say hello to loved ones, feeling bewildered. In fact, Kvanah came for a long time, and he heard their whole conversation completely, but did not tell them about it. The fair-haired woman was embarrassed no less than her husband, and nervously asked how he had come to the greenhouse for a long time. Kvanah dangled from the answer, saying only that he was worried when he heard that the jacket was in the garden and went down to check. The former warrior puffed out his cheeks and sarcastically asked what Kvanah was so alarmed, since he threw all the things and appeared. Kovan burned his friend with an evil look until he decided to leave his beloved alone and ran away from the greenhouse. Yusufir guessed that the Jackor from the very beginning knew that Kvanah was here and therefore asked her about their marriage. Kvanah was clenched and stated that he would like to say something to the Empress, She turned in his direction. The guy uncertainly rubbed his neck with his palm and politely asked if his wife could give him a moment of his own time. They settled on a bench in the garden to talk. Outside the window, it was already noticeably dark. Kvanah asked how she was sleeping. The girl replied that, honestly, not very much. He left yesterday and never returned by morning. She admitted that she was worried midnight, afraid that something could happen, and then she hadn't seen him all day. At some point at night, she was even visited by an alarming thought that her husband could leave her forever. It scared her. Yusfir said that she realized that he should be angry with her, but Kvanah assured that it was only his fault. He took her hand in his palm, showing his lilac support and demonstrating that he was now next to her. The emperor kissed her brush. He admitted that he scared her and insisted that she abandoned her idea. He considered that now she would hate him, would not want to see, and then he had nothing more to say. The regrets swept so much that he simply could not stand it and fled cowardly, avoiding difficulties. The empress said that, of course, his words surprised her, but he honestly told her that he only wanted to protect. This was enough for her. She would never hate him. The words of the wife very much reassured the man. She smiled lovingly to him and sincerely stated that she believes his words, so he had nothing more to worry about. The emperor wanted to add something else to his words, but did not manage to formulate the thought. As the dialogue continued by the Sphere, she thanked her husband for the flowers that appeared in her room every morning. She greatly appreciated this gesture. In fact, he wanted to give her something better. The girl asked why, because she is already more than enough. He said that he would still give this thing, because now was the right time. He took out an old pendant from his pocket. The pendant was a small, round shape. The lid was painted with a simple pattern. He gave it to his chosen one. When the girl took the pendant from the emperor's hands, everything around was lit up with flashes of pleasant green color. A lot of small greenish light, Shara suddenly fell into the air, illuminating the dark garden with a quiet light. Yusfir enthusiastically considered an amazing sight that formed around. This pendant was a magical artifact. Kvanah was glad to hear that the chosen one incredibly liked his gift, and his action was fascinated by the girl. The emperor said that he received this amulet from the courtesy. Radon had a trade agreement with them. The fair-haired smiled happily at him, and once again sincerely thanked. She said that this day would never forget. Unable to restrain the edgewoman to his lover anymore, Clan carefully pulled her to him and kissed her on his forehead. The girl looked at him puzzled, and the emperor found it necessary to ask if she had felt uncomfortable. The guy ran his thumb over her lower lip and asked whether she had goosebumps or had the thought of pulling away. The girl replied that she was not at all, and she even liked it. Therefore, Kvanah leaned closer and asked if he could continue. He asked her permission because he really wanted to kiss the girl, but at the same time, not to scare her off with his actions. The brunette was very attentive to the desires and feelings of his lover, so he patiently waited for her answer. The empress quietly said that she agreed, and Kvanah immediately crushed her lips with her, pulling into a delicate kiss. She remembered the guy's words that he had no experience in a relationship, but he kissed him more skillfully. When they pulled away, Kvanah said that she should breathe through her nose. The girl was too embarrassed by what happened. She admitted that she had never kissed before and did not know how to correctly. He offered to practice together. Kvanah again kissed her after he said that the more often they would do it, the sooner they could get used to it. When they broke away from each other again, the emperor again asked whether she liked, and the girl confirmed confidently. The guy said that since she liked the sensations, then they should do it again, and the Yusfer cheeks were filled with paint. The brunette leaned forward again, pulling the girl into a kiss, and she, although she was not against it, asked her to let her catch her breath. They took the opportunity to enjoy each other, as they had been waiting for this for a long time, but did not dare. A little later, Yusfir noticed that the light went out. Kvanah explained that this was because of the magic scroll. It did not last long. While the girl tried to digest his words, the brunette gently stroked his hand on her head. The empress asked if he was really used by a magic scroll, only to see this. Kvanah said this trifle. He thoughtfully twisted between his fingers the light strands of his wife's hair, carefully looking at them. Kvanah gently kissed her nose bridge and said that it was worth that, since the Usfir smiled at him then. In the past, the emperor often reflected on what would happen if he still had to marry someone. He knew that when this would happen, he would do everything to make this woman the happiest in the world. In those days when he was still a slave, marriage seemed to him an incomprehensible dream. But life developed in the best way for him. The girl thought about their marriage exclusively as an alliance between the two states. But it turned out that it was different for Kvanah. He just sincerely wanted to try to create a happy family with her, take care of her well, and make happy. That is why Kvanah took care of her all this time. He also embodied his dream of a good relatives. She ran a hand over his face, admiring her husband. She was so painful to deceive such a good person. Yusufir said that he forbade her to work with Simon only because he was worried. She understood. She knew very well how it hurt, helplessly watching how inexorably death takes your loved ones. But that's why she wanted to create a cure for squalidiosis, so that people of the empire do not have to face this nightmare. The brunette pressed his cheek to her hand and calmly asked once again how he could dissuade her from this decision. But he quickly realized that no way. Kvanah said that her inner power always greatly delighted him. He knew that the use-fear of those people who did what they planned. But he wanted her to think about her safety. Rejoicing that the emperor made concessions, the girl suggested a compromise: to spread the medicine secretly. They could do everything anonymously. People would not know that this is the emperor's initiative, unfortunately. But nothing. Let their opinion about Kvanah not change for the better. But this option was completely safe. True, of course. All this could become possible only if the emperor allowed her to help with this Simon. The man, thinking, asked if she was sure that they could make the medicine. She asked if he gives permission. Kvanah was powerlessly lowered his head, covering his face with his hands, and asked why the sphere generally took, that they needed it. As a result, surrendering. The brunette said that since this is still destined to happen, he could no longer argue with her. The emperor promised to find for her the safest way to explore the disease and rose from the bench. Everything was decided. But the girl grabbed him by the sleeve of the shirt, and before he left, asked if they would sleep in the same room today. The guy turned to her, thinking why she decided to ask this question so suddenly. He asked if she asked lonely. The girl replied that in this place there were almost no acquaintances, and, especially, people close to her. She took her husband with both palms by the hand to feel his support and understanding through the touch. If only because she had few loved ones here, she wanted Kvanah to stay next to her. And he promised her this. The terrifying events of an vindictive day swim in his head when the emperor lost his beloved last time. They were unexpectedly attacked, and the main blow fell on the carriage in which his empress was. The girl was pierced by the arrow in the very heart, and the Kvanah seemed to feel this pain in the chest dull when he saw her. He could not allow this terrible outcome of events to repeat with them, and in this life. Now he would save us fear. He promised that it would be next to the empress that would not happen to them, and will always try to protect her. After some time, the emperor and his chosen one returned to the conversation about the study of the disease and drugs. Kvanah told us that there are 16 underground passages in the event of emergency situations. They were going to go down to one of these moves, because the guy was about to show something to his wife there. The emperor pointed to the usual, at first glance, a figurine, saying that this is their key to one of the aisles. This figurine stood in a row with others, so the empress should remember that the third on the back was leading to the black move. After the brunette took advantage of the figurine as a lever, the walls in front of them parted, forming a secret passage. Kvanah held out his hand to his empress and invited her to go inside together and go down. His affectionate smile and restrained appearance inspired confidence, and the Usfir only thanks to this ceased to be afraid to go. The imperial couple, holding hands, carefully dropped down the stairs, twisted by a spiral. They went down quite quickly. The man said that there were many places where they could start work, but he chose it. He sank into a small room in which all the appliances necessary for the study found. The girl could not even think that something similar could be in the palace. She was glad that she was given this. The guy said that real magic had just had to happen when Usfir, Simon, and Oslin would begin to work. Just when they mentioned the guys mentioned went into the room, bringing paper and books from the Union. A surprised exclamation of the Empress Oslin replied that he had designed this underground passage, so he knew how to go down. When Kvanah asked him to build a safe place, He thought about how to construct it correctly, and now it turned out. But when Aslan was engaged in building, he did not know that the emperor knew in advance what he was using the room. Be that as it may, the baron watched the data provided and realized that the essence of the work was rather unusual. Therefore, Aslan offered the empress and Simon a couple of extra working hands in his face. He really wanted to help them. In fact, he has already begun to help and systematized all the personal information of the patients about whom there were records in the temples. To recognize the disease, it was necessary to identify the causes and general symptoms. While Aslan and Simon discussed the nuances of the work of what was done and what was coming, the empress suddenly thanked them. Not so long ago, Sir Aslan has come a long way to help her and the emperor, so they could not waste time. Baron Bainar was embarrassed and shyly replied that no thanks were needed at all. He did nothing like that. Having tied hair for more convenient work, Yusfir offered to get down to business as soon as possible. She was eager to start. Kvanah was only once to see how the fuse and interest her lover took up a new business. Since this trinity began work on the study, exactly 1 week has passed. It was already a deep night. Simon, terribly tired, sat at the table, disappointedly bowing his head. Yusfir asked him whether he found something. The red-haired man upset up that he thinks that nothing interesting. Somewhere near them, Aslan yawned over them. The main doctor, rubbing his eyes, said that the disease appeared suddenly, and there were no distinctive symptoms. The incubation period was different. Patients lived in more than one area. They were of different sexes and age, nothing in common. This week, they have not revealed the cause of the disease. Everyone was tired, but did not even advance in the study these days. The girl was sitting at the table and, writing down something with a pen on paper, tried to focus on work. She did not notice at all how she accidentally touched the inkwell with her elbow, and she fell, splashing all the dark contents on the table. Marianne, who was also in the room, immediately ran up to her and offered to wipe the empress's table. Yusfir apologized for her clumsiness and for spilling ink on the record, she just thought. Mariana said that nothing is wrong, but she was worried that the blonde almost had not rested recently. The girl assured the maid that everything was in order and it was her duty as an empress. She had to cope. The maid tried to distract the empress from work and offered to at least rest a little and drink tea. And to replace the inkwell, it took time. Yusfir agreed to tea and soon sat in her room with a cup. She blessedly drank the marquise's tea, while the brown-haired woman told the empress that she should not load herself like that. Scoliosis raged in the empire for several years, and no one could deal with it. It is normal that so far it was difficult for them. The former ruler of these lands, Fernan, neglected this disease, so it spread only more. Even an attempt to understand the causes of the disease that they had to cope alone before was wonderful. Nothing that they moved slowly. The fact that they do not inactive have already helped the people of the empire, including Marianne. The empress said that she was afraid to imagine what her life in the palace would be if not for Marianne, and thanked her. The maid was sorry that she could not take care of Asfir even better. She wanted to brew her tea on the water from the Fahar River. The Fahar River was nothing more than the blessing of the goddess. She was huge and flowed through the entire empire. The higher the flow, the cleaner the water in the river, which made the aroma of tea even more beautiful. Mariana knew a lot about the river. This is because she spent all her childhood in a tree, which was at the source of the river. The water there was insanely clean. Yusfir listened with interest about this, because in her country there was nothing of the kind. She asked how long Marianne lived there. The maid replied that she lived there until she was 14, and then she had to leave with her sister to the capital. Someone had to earn for them, at least for food, so Marianne had to grow up early enough. After the death of her parents, Edith fell ill, being small. Therefore, it was the long sister of the sister to take care of her. Despite the fact that girls from the same family, only Edith suffered from squalidiosis. Perhaps this was because she lived in the village much longer than the older sister. Maybe the secret was in the Fahar River? The empress jumped on the spot to quickly rush to the map, pondering her assumption. The Fahar River proceeded just through the whole kingdom and could cause people's illness in different regions. She remembered how they spread to Cheetah on her records, symbolically recalling the very river. The girl had a guess. She was scared and unpleasant to admit this, but it was highly likely that the Fahar River could be contaminated. The empress immediately gathered her notes and ran to her husband to offer him to study the Fahar River. She made conclusions that scoliosis, although covered the entire empire, were areas where the incidence rate was lower. She pointed a finger at the diagram in several places. People had less scoliosis in places where Fahar did not flow. Drinking tea, Kvan carefully listened to his wife, listening to every word of her and looking at the notes provided. The blonde said that all the people suffering from scoliosis in the thesis are migrants who came in search of work. It was quite possible that scoliosis was a disease that was transmitted by water, and the source was the Fahar River. Without delaying this matter for later, the emperor and the empress gathered and together went to the Fahar River for intelligence. On the shore, a young man was leaned to them, who really wanted to give a couple a flower. He said that this rose was blessed by the goddess and was perfect for the newlyweds. Such an appeal confused a couple. Noticing their strange reaction, the boy was at a loss and asked if he was really mistaken and they were not a newlywed. Yusfir hastened to reassure him and said that he was completely right. She took a rose and confirmed that they were newlyweds. They went on the embankment, saying goodbye to the boy. For both of them, this was the first cases of day disguise. Kvanah felt a little awkward. Yusfir was convinced that they coped well, since they had not yet recognized them. For the guy, this was not the first case of camouflage, but he always did it only at night and secretly. Kvan was thinking about the fact that even if now everything is a peaceful one, who knows where and what a danger could arise. The empress did not suspect that he was so worried. It seemed to her that he readily responded to a request. In truth, her offer excited him greatly, but he understood that he could not and did not want to refuse her. Yes, and now she was best versed in what was happening and follow her opinion. It was the right decision, as he thought. And Aslan and Simon believed that her insight can be trusted. Yusfir said that they were flattered by all. The emperor argued and said that his wife was simply created in order to take care of public affairs. But the problem was that even when the girl was masked, her innate nobility could not be hidden. Embarrassed by the words of Kvanah and how close he stood to her, Yusfir said that he was wrong and she was completely ordinary. The guy replied that she was not right, and even now she was beautiful, and even did not imagine how much. He immediately kissed her and scrolled it in the air, easily lifting his lover in his arms. She answered the kiss, but quickly pulled away, screaming that now there was no time for tenderness. Kvan agreed, and they began to work. He said that he would go down to the water, and the girl would check the surroundings. The emperor whispered in her ear that if something happened suddenly, she could call a man in a blue jacket nearby. As it turned out, not far from them, hiding behind a tree, there was a jacker, ready to ensure them at any moment. Kvanah told the girl not to worry much. Jack Perret is a retired military man, so sometimes he was given some tasks. The emperor nevertheless headed towards the river and finally told his wife that he would return soon. Yusfir was very glad that the emperor nevertheless allowed her to work undercover, despite her anxiety. If he did not agree, dealing with this story would be much more difficult. Now they assumed that the Fahar River was the cause of the disease, but the empress was not fully sure of this. Many people drank water from this river, used it for different needs, but not all became ill. The girl hoped that the plants would be able to give her at least some kind of hint, so she first turned to them. And as soon as the youth's fire was touched by the first flower, she heard the mental cry of the plant for help. All flowers were very afraid of what was in river water and offered to share their memories of what happened. They very much asked her to save poor flowers and showed her memories of a mysterious person in a long dark mantle. This man, presumably a man, for something sank to the river, holding out his hand to her. Around his palms, streams of some dark energy began to flow, he conjured, sitting above the water. The empress watched him alarmed, trying to understand what this unknown man was doing and what he wanted to achieve. Watching this person, the girl felt some strange feeling in her chest. She already felt something like that. Suddenly, she dawned on her. This piercing pain in the chest, she realized why the feeling seemed familiar to her. It was the same magic that killed her in a past life. On the river Fahar conjured the ally of her brother. The empress was made with a small tremor. Why did she feel the magic of that man in the Fahar River? It was a little strange, because the magician who worked for Dequit lived in Ahi, not to Radon. Although it is possible that this magician was specially sent to apply a spell on the river in order to spread the disease, she did not want to believe that all this horror through which the empire passed entered the plan of her brother. Having finished illuminating the memories of the flowers, the fair-haired jumped in horror, not even noticing that her hat flew away. The empire was in terrible danger. If her brother really ordered to pollute the Fahar River, then what did he achieve? In his subordination, the magician, in whose power to create such a thing with a huge river. If the goal was a war, they would have already begun it. Squelius progressed slowly. If you take medications, then you could hold out for several years. The girl dawned. If only the expensive medicines supplied by the top of Jilly were more accessible. In thoughts, the words and facts flashed in a series that quickly lay in her head in a single picture. The powerful ally of the brother, as well as people who were entrusted with following her, were one of these fragments. She also remembered her brother's words, that in order to destroy the empire, they did not need discord between the emperor and the conservatives. She squeezed her dress with her hands, not wanting to believe that her guesses would be faithful. First of all, Daiquit tried to earn money on medicines, and with the help of these means to shake the empire from the inside. While the girl in a panic was thinking about how to tell her wife about everything, he returned to her, bringing one and her hat. Seeing her wife, the girl immediately rushed to him and began to chatter something about trouble, about the Fahar River, about the empire. She wanted to slow down and explain everything to her husband, but she was afraid that her words might seem absurd to him. She recognized this information with the help of her ability, which was so complex because of her brother neglected. Having taken out his lover out of anxious thoughts, Kvanah carefully hugged her and said that everything would be in order. The girl did not expect such an unexpected manifestation of support. She was embarrassed and surprised to face her husband's chest. He noticed that it seems that the girl was what to tell him, and obviously, something important that did not tolerate delay. To finally reassure his wife, he is attracted to her closer to him and said that he always believes her and would believe. She clung to him in response, desperately clutching the fabric of the emperor's jacket with trembling hands. She asked if he had a guess, and he said that this is not important. He will always believe her and her words. At these words, the girl could no longer restrain herself and sobbed loudly. She needed to cry what had accumulated in her soul. The emperor and the empress settled on the riverbank, and all this time, Yusfir told him about her magic. She assumed that the emperor would be dissatisfied with the fact that she could eavesdrop on others. But Kvanah did not at all understand what dissatisfaction could be discussed, if it was a very useful ability. He said that if it were not for her gift, the empire would have fallen, without having learned the cause of squilidiosis. She saved them. The brunette did not understand at all why he would feel dissatisfaction when she did so much for the people of the empire. The girl did not know how to explain her experiences, but thanked for the fact that he believed and listened to her, and for the fact that he did not call her ability useless. She promised that she would find a way to cope with scoliosis. She was very decisively configured, and even said that she already had one idea regarding this. Having gathered a little later in their Sodan laboratories, Yusfir invited Simon and Osman to examine medicines. She offered to study the details how the condition of the patients changed after taking the medicine. Now that they knew the cause of the disease, it was pointless to look for a general factor. Yusfir was sure that there was a special ingredient in the medicines that were traded by Jilly. Simon, quickly analyzing the information, noted that all patients who had better developed vitiligo. The girl asked what it was, and the guy showed that the chest and stomach of one patient were sick, so it was with Edith. They were very sick and extra. After taking the medicine, it became much better. The pain gradually disappeared. Aslan confirmed that they took medicine, but was there really something that causes vitiligo? However, the scream was that magic had a strong effect on the ingredients, so it would be difficult to determine them. The Empress said that she read that vitiligo is a chronic disease of the elves. She took out a book in which it was written about this and showed the guys most of the changes in their skin color. The reason why the elves were prone to vitiligo was in a special grass that grew only there. And if the medicine was made of this effect, then this could become the key to unraveling their problems. The girl was insanely excited by the fact that every day they were getting closer to solving the problem. Meanwhile, King Dequit was scheduled for a meeting in a dark forest with his mysterious mage assistant. The king turned to a magician named Roman and was unhappy that he was late, forcing him to wait. The very first thing Dequit was interested in was an experiment as a novel. He said that excellent. In addition, trade was in the plus and the import of drugs brought stable income. But the king could not properly enjoy this, because he thought that if the Usfir had done something, it would be easier. But no matter how he waited, he had no information, sister, absolutely. Even insignificant little things. In this case, the novel suggested that they do as they recently agreed. Since the girl was useless, he clarified, didn't Divkit give him permission that if she stands in their way, he could take care of it? The ruler of Ahe noticeably strained these words, and he asked with excitement, did his sister do something suspicious? The novel reported that it was a message that the emperor and his wife incognito had come to the Fahar River. Of course, it could just be a walk, but caution would not be superfluous. This news was alarmed by the blonde. Roman smiled insanely and told Deki not to worry, because Usfir would never be able to catch him. Not to catch, she had no chance even to understand who he was at all. Meanwhile, the descendants continued in the palace. Simon reproached himself for not guessing to study the ingredients. Simon, excited by how their business is moving, now and then praised the ruler for her deep knowledge. The girl tried to dissuade compliments, but the red-haired man stood his ground and said that their empress was incredible. The guy asked us to train him and how to understand his extensions, and Aslan tried to calm him down. While all three, in an exalted mood, discussed the subtleties of work, the emperor came to them. He noticed that their team was directly glowing with happiness. Therefore, asked if they found some kind of clue. Usfir boasted to her husband by finding one specific healing grass in the medicine. Kvanah thoughtfully looked at the article that the girl showed him and said that this grass grew on the lands of the Dark Elves. The empress was worried about the fact that it would be difficult to get it, but Kvanah was ready to take care of this. Aslan explained that the emperor found a way to prevent the top of Jili to monopolize the trade relations of the peoples. Thanks to this, they recently concluded a secret deal with dwarves, which favorably affected their empire. And for the dwarf for many years, warm relationships with dark elves have been preserved. So you can agree, the girl was very inspired by the fact that, apparently, they really had the opportunity to see them. But only when Aslan, after some time, tried to agree on a meeting with the dark elves. Nothing came of it. He talked in a bar with one familiar supreme dwarf, and he told Aslan not to carry nonsense. Baron Bainar did not understand why this was impossible. Did they still unrest him? Dwarf said that he admits that his help was very useful and grateful for the new trade path from the Radon Empire. But it was too difficult to agree on a meeting with dark elves, especially when it came to people. The dark elves hated people, and even if the dwarves entrusted for them, this would still not help to persuade them. In addition, Dwarf was not going to raise this topic, but recently they began to attack the elves. Aslan was very surprised when he heard about it, because he did not hear such news and did not even expect. Dwarf said that most of the victims lived next to the territories of people. This could not but alarm. Therefore, of course, the elves believed that this was the whole work of people and treated them even more unkind. Given the situation, Dwarf did not want to take the wounds of old friends to get acquainted with a suspicious person. But, despite the fact that it was impossible to organize a meeting, Dwarf took pity on him and brought the seeds of that grass. Dwarf gave Aslan to the medicinal grass, which they needed for research, and, wishing good luck, left. It's good that they now had grass, but Oslina's soul was still restless. He did not expect problems of this kind. The Baron reported about everything the Emperor and his wife immediately arrived in the palace. Usfir was glad that they got seeds. At the same time, she did not know whether she could cope without elves. Kvanah wanted to apologize, but she said that everything was in order. The Empress knew that she should not despair. She had seeds, which means she simply had to find a way. The next day, the Emperor, as usual recently, found his wife in their secret underground room. He quietly crept behind and asked what she was doing in the laboratory today. She said that she found several notes that contained information about how the dark elves grew herbs. She hoped that since her magic is associated with plants, she would succeed, but that was not enough. The girl was afraid that she would not be able to germinate the seed, but her husband tore her away from the experiences. He asked how long she was here, He threw a plaid on the girl, saying that she was very cold, and also recalled that Marina was waiting for her upstairs. Kvanah said that it seems that recently, the US sphere has completely ceased to take care of his diet and sleep mode. This was told to him by Marianne, who was worried about the Empress. The girl asked only whether the maid was worried. The husband kissed her brush and said that all the inhabitants of the palace were worried about her, so he asked her to be careful. Everyone in the castle hoped that she could at least slightly alleviate the burden that had constrained her heart. And also, everyone hoped that she could give them at least a tiny key to understanding how she wants to help the empire. But among all the inhabitants of the Kvan Palace, the most day was waiting for the day when he could again give her flowers every morning. He was very worried about her and wanted to see her happy. The way she tormented herself with loads killed him. The emperor asked the girl to fulfill his request, and at least today not to leave him alone, but to relax together. Yusufir thought about it and reproached that she allowed herself to forget thanks to whom all this became possible. I forgot that it was Kvanah who first believed in her, and all the time helped her not give up. After all, it was he who forced her to love the empire, and subsequently tied her heart to himself. The girl approached his lips for maximum upset, and then stopped and asked if she could kiss him. He was surprised at how suddenly his wife asked him about this, but was very pleased with her actions. Kvanah smiled and, sighing, said that recently they were both busy. He pressed her with his back to the countertop, placing his hands on both sides of the girl's waist, blocking movements. The brunette reminded her that they promised to practice to get used to, but the blonde suddenly stopped him. She pushed her husband a little, but after a moment she gently clung to his lips. Yusufir said that she did it simply because she wanted to kiss him first, and not vice versa. And the next kiss again led Kvanah, who could not overcome this desire, seeing how charming his wife was. They spent some time in private, enjoying the presence of each other until the Yusufir asked to let her go. He refused, because perhaps this opportunity would not be provided soon. He promised that he would not delay her. Yusufir asked her husband forgiveness for her behavior recently. She was the only hope of Ahe, and their guardian deity expected that it would return the country to life, so the Yusufir lay a big responsibility. That is why she believed that taking responsibility for everything around her is correct and natural. Unexpected honesty was very struck by Kvanah. The girl was not so apart told him about such a personal. But the empress said that now everything is different, because Kvanah believed in her and convinced that she would always help her. Therefore, she said that she also wants to completely believe and trust her husband. He wants to solve this problem with him. The girl's ardent speeches were interrupted when she suddenly noticed that Kvanah was lying in her pocket and asked about it. He asked her not to move, as she was sitting on his knees, and said that he would get it now. He fished out a bubble from his pocket, in which there was water and the Fehar rivers. He scored it in the morning, thinking that this could help us fear. But then I realized that this was just water. She hated herself in moments when he was so stupid on emotions. He bashfully said that he would probably be more useful to her if he were a wizard or archmage, not an emperor. The girl laughed briefly and said that it sounds as if he had become an emperor because of her. But Kvanah confirmed. Yusufir smiled and asked him, at least in the presence of Aslan, not to joke such jokes. But the emperor said that he was not joking. Since ancient times, Emperor Kvanah wanted to become a magician, and not just an ordinary magician, but the strongest that could change the whole world alone. The blonde smiled again and jokingly said that all the more good that Kvanah still became the emperor. To give an example, Yusufir suggested comparing a bottle of water brought by Kahanas and his heart. If you imagine that a bottle is his heart, then the water in this bottle is magic that can be stored in it. All living things had a certain amount of magic with which their body is able to cope, and the power of some could be commensurate, unless with liquid in this bottle. Other water has more water inside than water in the entire Fehar River. Such creatures were called wizards. Among people, it was difficult to find someone who could use their magic. She is sure that there is magic inside Kvanah. Yusufir thoughtfully said that if Kvanah wanted to become a wizard, then he should be born an elf, because the elves were just well-versed in magic and knew how to control the one that found inside themselves. Kvanah was upset his head and said that the empress had just destroyed his cherished dream. Yusufir asked for forgiveness because she did not want to offend him at all, and Kvanah asked she met another wizard. She replied that she had never been, but she would really like. And she also said that wizards could feel the power of others. At that moment, as if the world around her seemed to slow down, she came to her a sharp awareness that his head was reduced. She froze in place and suddenly remembered the feeling that she had overtaken her when meeting with the younger sister of Marianne. At that time, Edith was probably just too weak, so the US sphere did not immediately understand what was the matter. But it was definitely power. The magical power that the Empress felt from their handshake. Edith definitely had the strength, and if you think, then all patients suffering from scoliosis had magical forces. But why is the key to cure? Elves. They were so closely connected with magic that they could use it from birth. It is also worth considering the fact that after taking the medicine in patients, Vitili develops an elf's disease. It turned out that that mysterious magician from the very beginning hunted only for people with magic. Meanwhile, in the estate of one aristocrat was completely quiet, with the exception of a cautious knock on the door. The owner of the top of Gilly Roman specified his assistant how the preparation for the banquet was promoted. He replied that everything was fine. The owner could not worry. The invitations were also sent to all people. Roman handed the subject another black envelope and asked him to send him when there would be time. He said that these are important people, and he would like to invite them personally. The letter had to be sent to the imperial palace. One day, when Marianne hung bed underwear on the street, Baron Edwin approached her and asked how she was doing. Without waiting for an answer, he asked how the US sphere was there. The maid said that everything as usual, she works, goes to the library. The maid's hands were slightly trembling with excitement, but, given what position she was in, Marianne was well held. The Baron asked about the relationship of the Empress with the aristocrats. The maid said that she did not invite anyone after tea. Marianne apologized that she could not be useful. The Baron replied that he did not come to find out about the Empress. He handed the girl the same black envelope, an invitation to a banquet, which will soon take place at the top of Gilly. Before the mass distribution of drugs for squalidiosis begins, a meeting will be organized for all aristocrats. He handed the envelope to Marianne and said that she should make sure Her Majesty became interested in a banquet. It should not have been so difficult. It was just worth saying that it was a good opportunity to make new acquaintances. And then, it was just possible to accidentally drop an invitation to the bedroom, and the Empress would lead to the trick. She asked warily whether she realized correctly that the will of those who stood behind the Baron. He grinned crookedly and unkind to her. Was it important? Be that as it may, the banquet should not have left Eusphere indifferent. It could guarantee it. Saying goodbye, he left. Mary Anna, holding an unfortunate envelope in her hands, tried to understand how dangerous an event could be. Meanwhile, Simon and Edith were puzzled by the fact that Eusphere so suddenly came to their hospital. She took the girl by the hands and, as expected, was right. Edith was a sorceress, but she did not know about it. Yes, and it turned out that all the local patients that suffered from scoliosis had magic. The Empress looked very distant and wary, but, nevertheless, called Simon to her. She told him that, apparently, she was finally able to unravel the secret of scoliosis. After some time, she gathered in one room Simon, Oslina, and Kvanah, telling them about the situation, everything she knew. She checked, and it turned out that everyone had weakened magical abilities in the hospital. Kvanah was most disturbed by the fact that the Eusphere itself could become infected, since it had magic and was at risk. The Empress answered him that everything was in order, because if she had been infected, then this would have appeared a long time ago. Yesterday, she decided to experiment with the water fahar, which Kavan brought, pouring it into her palm. She suppressed her magical power to a minimum, then touched the water, and for a while it was seized by paralysis. It turned out that this disease was aimed at innocent people who did not suspect the existence of their magic. Aslan stopped her, and, swallowing, asked if he realized correctly that scoliosis was created artificially. The girl really did not want to admit this. But yes, she understood that it was so. She confidently announced her guess that the water of the Fahar River was deliberately poisoned with the help of strong magic. Eusphere apologized for hiding this. She just did not want to blindly rush to theories, but now she was confident. Aslan thanked her for the information and asked if the girl knew what this magic was, whether something was known. The Empress said that, unfortunately, there was no. Magic was like a book to understand the essence of the ending was not enough. She still did not know how, but they needed to find out and get acquainted with what was before. So, if they wanted to get rid of the magic that struck the Fahar River, they should find out who created it, and, which is also important, which this person wanted to achieve with all these deaths of innocent people. However, if you do not meet with the magician who are guilty of what happened personally, then it will be especially difficult to figure it out. Yusfir confirmed that she had fears that the top of Gili was somehow connected with that magician. Tears appeared in front of Simon's eyes. He could not understand how someone had the conscience to light an epidemic for the sake of personal benefit. Trying to control emotions, the Empress said that it was still early to give up and put a sheet of paper on the table. Aslan and Simon immediately took him, and this turned out to be the same invitation to a banquet from the top of Gili. They wanted to spread the cure for scoliosis throughout the empire and invited it to the banquet in honor of this. Aslan said that no matter how important, it would not be a way to get rid of scoliosis. They could not risk the Yusfir. They could not send the Empress right into the lair of the enemy, donating to the sake of this security. Kvakan also very much asked his wife not to commit rash acts and not go there. He was very afraid for her. Yusfir firmly replied that she understood how suspicious and dangerous it was, but could not miss such a chance. Perhaps it was there that she could meet with the magician who created scoliosis, and if not, then she could look for evidence that the owner of Gili and this magician is somehow connected. Therefore, she insistently asked Kvanah to go to the banquet with her and find out everything. She needed his help. Let the emperor be difficult to agree to this, but in the end, he supported his wife, saying that he could not betray her trust. Aslan tried to reason the couple, but they did not listen to him. The brunette ordered the baron to send a response letter, and in this letter to write that the emperor and the empress agree. They will gladly visit a banquet that will take place at the top of Gili. Yusfir was determined. She felt that it was her duty to figure out this whole story. A few days later, the emperor and the empress arrived at the banquet. There was even a hunting area. Yusfir heard that the peak of Gili had special historical significance for the empire, but the girl could not even think that they belonged to a whole huge forest. Kvanah was worried because the forest was full of insects, and also, who knows, the wife could stumble upon wild animals. The husband excitingly squeezed the girl's hand in her palm, but she assured him that she was not so weak. Whenever Yusfir saw Kvanah, she continued to think about what was happening earlier. For example, Mariana said that recently, the emperor began to come to the kitchen every day. He did this in order to check the food that was delivered to the palace. The cooks were very concerned about it. The empress did not understand why it was so far away, but the maids assured that in order to protect her, the news that Yusfir was going to visit a banquet was very excited by Marianne and the rest of the people in the palace. But now, when the maid knew how much His Majesty cared for her, Marianne was calm for the empress. Before sending Yusfir to a banquet, the maid asked her to try and give the Empire Radon a bright future. The emperor suddenly interrupted the girl's thoughts and asked his wife what she thought so deeply about. She did not know how to say Kavanahu that she tried to understand how he treated her and what she was thinking about her. No less than this question, the girl was worried about her own experiences regarding what she thinks of him. Kvanah, noticing the confusion on the face of his lover, hastened to tell her that in which case they could immediately leave. The empress held out her hand to him and intertwined their fingers, soothingly telling her husband that everything was in perfect order. She smiled affectionately brunette and said that he helped her very much in her mission. And not only. While they talked, the official opening of the banquet began, and one of the subjects faded into the horn, attracting attention. The owner of the top entered the stage and apologized for being late. He introduced himself and greeted people. Kvanah, already immediately feeling an uncomfortable atmosphere, pressed his wife closer, hugging her. The red-haired man smiled broadly at the guests from the stage. He said that his name was Roman. Yusfir looked at him, but was not particularly interested. Now she knew at least what the Supreme looked like. The owner assured the guests that they could not worry about their safety. His subjects controlled everything here. Kvanah asked the girl to provide him with the inside of the forest for examination, and she offered to do the external. The emperor promised to do everything possible, to get the necessary information and report good news. Yusfir, in response, promised to protect herself and also wished Kwanahu successful hunting in the forest. He saddled the horse and moved away from her, but in his hand he squeezed some paper. Obviously, this note was very important to him. He promised that this time he would become her knight for the Empress. Meanwhile, Roman raised a hype among the people, warming the crowd. Noticing that all the riders occupied their horses, he solemnly announced the beginning of the hunt. Kvan, along with other guest hunters, rode into the thick thicket of the forest. Meanwhile, Yusfir, having secured the help of Simon and Jax, went far from the camp enough to look around. She tried to establish a connection with the plants, hoping that this time they would give her some kind of clue. She leaned her forehead against the majestic large tree and asked him for help and permission to talk to him. That's just the tree. As soon as it realized what the magician was talking to him, tried to drive her away and shouted loudly. The girl had never met such an aggressive plant before. She tried to convince him that she would not harm him. She explained what she wanted to know about the owner of the forest. The tree called the novel a traitor, the destroyer, and the killer. Instead of answering the question of why the tree thinks so, it decided to better show its memories. The first that Yusfer saw was an ordinary wooden wagon, on which they put a pillar of wood and firewood. Nearby stood the very mysterious magician, whom the Empress was looking for. She tried to see what was still in the wagon, and that she was insanely frightened. From under a pile of firewood, the pale, cold hand of a lifeless body was visible. There was not even one dead body in the wagon. The magician sentenced that, at such a pace, they would not have time to complete everything on time. But even more than the presence of lifeless bodies in the wagon, the girl was scared by the fact that now she knew the identity of the magician. It was a novel, the owner of the top of Jilly. He looked indifferent and cold at the people killed by him. The Empress, spying on him because of the tree, tried to understand why the man needed the bodies. But the next moment, the magician bowed before the wagon and began to conjure, enveloping all the space with streams of magic. The girl was painful and scared to look at what was happening with the owner. He threw off the mantle, and then his body began to fight in convulsions and change before his eyes. The scarlet jets of concentrated magic stretched from the ground up, as if trying to reach the edges to the moon. When the scarlet fog began to dissipate, the Yusfir saw that the novel had applied the magic of translating and gained a real appearance.